All right, good evening, everyone. If I can please have your attention. Welcome to the October 7th, 2014 meeting of the Downers Grove Village Council. It is my distinct pleasure to call this meeting to order. There are copies of tonight's agenda on either side of the room. If you haven't already done so, please pick up a copy and you can follow along with tonight's proceedings. There will be multiple opportunities for public comment, both with respect to items that are on our agenda tonight, as well as a section for public comments of a general nature pertaining to items that are not on our agenda, and that is item 4 on tonight's agenda. So follow along, and if you have comments of a general nature, item 4 would be the time for that, and if you have comments with respect to things that are on the agenda, we will entertain public comment around the time when we get to them. So with that, I would like to first begin with our proud custom of beginning our meetings by reciting the Pledge of Allegiance. Please rise and join us in the pledge. I pledge
allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you very much, everyone. Now, if I could please ask our fine village clerk, April Holden, to call the roll.
Commissioner Jose?
Here.
Commissioner Olson?
Here.
Commissioner Rankin?
Here.
Commissioner Barnett?
Here.
Commissioner Neustadt?
Here.
Commissioner Durkin?
Here.
Mayor Tully?
Here. Thank you very much. That brings us to item 3 in our agenda, which pertains to minutes of prior council meetings. We have 2 sets of minutes to review tonight. Our executive session minutes for release on July 1st, 2001, and our regular council meeting minutes from our meeting on September 16th, 2014. Do any members of the village council any changes, corrections, or comments? Seeing as there are none, do I have a motion to approve?
So moved. Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? None. Those minutes are approved. And just like that, ladies and gentlemen, we are at item 4. If there are any questions or comments of a general nature, now would be the time to think about them while I do 2 very important things. And that would be, we have a couple of proclamations that we'd like to give out tonight. First proclamation is in recognition of Fire Prevention Week. Whereas the Downers Grove Fire Department sponsors an annual fire prevention program, and whereas the Downers Grove Fire Department's primary concern and interest is the protection and safety for life and property in the village of Downers Grove. And whereas the Downers Grove Fire Department renders a vital public safety and prevention service in the village of Downers Grove. And whereas the observance of Fire Prevention Week provides an excellent opportunity for individuals to check for fire hazards and test smoke detectors in their homes and businesses. Now therefore, I, Martin T. Tully, Mayor of the Village of Downers Grove, do hereby proclaim the week of October 5th through 11th, 2014 to be Fire Prevention Week in the Village of Downers Grove. And we have some special guests here tonight to receive the proclamation. Marcia Giesler, and we have Chief Jackson somewhere. There he is, Chief Jackson. The 2 of you would like to come up front, please. Oh, sorry. Come on over.
What did he say?
Mr. Officer. All right. Do a little handshake. Thank you very much. That's all right. Chief, thank you. Thank you very much. And if you have anything you'd like to share with us about some of the activities that go on during Fire Prevention Week, please, podium is yours.
That would be me, I guess.
See, it was you all the time.
I know. Okay, he'll hear about this later. At any rate, tomorrow night is our annual Night at the Firehouse from 6:30 to 8:30 p.m. It's fun, it's educational. The kids love it, but we also hope that the adults, the parents, are learning a lot. So come on out and join us at Station 5. And Friday night is the 20th annual Silent Parade. So that has been a tradition in our area. It goes from Hinsdale all the way to Lisle, through the contiguous towns down Maple Avenue. And it is a tribute to all of our fallen firefighters and any civilians that have lost their lives to fires. So this proves to be a pretty big year, and we'd like to have everybody come out and honor the firefighters. That's it. Thank you.
Terrific. Thank you very much for sharing that, and thank you for everything you do to raise awareness with respect to those issues in our community.
Thank you.
Thank you. Very good. The second proclamation tonight is another in a series of Green Enterprise Awards that we have been giving out to various businesses. The Environmental Concerns Commission, one of our boards and commissions, is charged with identifying and choosing green businesses, different businesses within our community, to receive the Village of Downers Grove Green Business Award. This is something that we started not too long ago and had the opportunity to award a number of different businesses in the community. And we think that it helps to raise awareness of green practices and recognize those who implement green practices within their businesses, which is something that the Village of Downers Grove likes to do and lead by example. And we discuss that from time to time as well. Tonight, we are very proud as a Village Council to recognize Tivoli Enterprises Incorporated to be the latest recipient of a Village of Downers Grove Green Business. And I would like to begin, before presenting the proclamation, by reading it, before inviting representatives of Tivoli Enterprises to accept the proclamation and, of course, share any good news with us or other words about what was involved in achieving this recognition. Whereas Tivoli Enterprise Incorporated, located at 603 Rogers Street in Downers Grove, operates Classic Cinemas, the Tivoli Hotel and Bowling Alley, and is proudly known as the hometown movie theater for Downers Grove. And whereas Tivoli Enterprises has been operating in the Village of Downers Grove since 1978, and whereas Tivoli Enterprises has made a commitment to sustainability by preserving and improving its historic properties, and has made substantial efforts to be environmentally friendly in the areas of waste reduction, recycling, energy conservation, transportation, and innovation, one of our favorite words. Whereas the Environmental Concerns Commission has acknowledged the green business practices of Tivoli Enterprises and has recognized Tivoli Enterprises as an example for other historic buildings on August 14, 2014, now, therefore, I, Martin T. Tully, Mayor of the Village of Downers Grove, do hereby proclaim Tivoli Enterprises Incorporated to be a Village of Downers Grove green business. If I can now invite our guests up front to receive the proclamation. Well, it's always good to see you. Yeah, come up here and here. It's good to have you here. I don't want to cover up the tie. Terrific. And congratulations. Thank you very much. I had 2 weeks off. I should have known there's always 2. All right, thank you. Mr. Johnson, if you would like to share a few words with us, no obligation, but I offer you the podium.
Thank you. I guess I'm never at a loss for words, or at least so I'm told. This was a labor of love, I guess, working for this application, leading to the proclamation tonight, and we're very proud of it, and we're very proud of what we do with our have done with our buildings and the part they play in Downers Grove, as well as trying to make them as environmentally friendly as we can. So again, thank you for the recognition, and we will display this with pride. Thank you.
Thank you very much, and thank you for being another leading example of a green business in Downers Grove, and we hope that you receive additional recognition and continue to inspire other businesses and residents. Very good. Now, you've all had plenty of time to think about comments and questions of a general nature. We move on to item 4 on our agenda. If there are any questions or comments of a general nature with respect to items not appearing on our agenda tonight, I would invite any interested residents to please come to the podium and share with us their thoughts or questions. Good evening.
Good evening, Mayor and Commissioners, Village Manager. I've had the pleasure or displeasure of communicating with you gentlemen and ladies this week by email. A week ago today, in the morning, afternoon, I happened to visit the village parking lot, and I observed what I call a municipal garbage dump in the village parking lot just behind Anderson Bookshop and behind some of the businesses. So I sent you some pictures of what I consider a garbage dump, and I got some comments from a couple of the commissioners, and I got a very nice letter or email from the village manager informing me that he was in receipt of the email, and he was waiting for direction from the village commissioners and the mayor, because it takes a consensus of your dais to move forward on this issue. I was advocating that the containers and the garbage that was strewn around because the containers were overflowing, was responsibility of the people who had the containers, which are the businesses that front on Main Street, south of Burlington, about halfway down. The businesses south of where the driveway starts behind the library maintain their garbage disposal dumpsters, et cetera, alongside their buildings. Somewhere along the way, back as 4 or 5 years ago that I remember, because it was an issue at that time, Commissioner Barnett was a library liaison, and I networked him and Linda Kunze, and at that time, there was an effort made to they were going to do a retaining, or how'd you call it, a wall.
Enclosure.
Enclosure. That has never happened. The containers, for some reason, seem to be inadequate, and the tops come up, the garbage blows around, overflows. I believe some of the businesses are not responsible citizens and let their garbage out like that. But it also comes into the second question. This array of garbage is on village property, so that's why I'm appealing to Dias to ask the owners to take their receptacles back and put it where it should be, on their private property. And doubly important is that the library has now been refurbished. It's in top-notch shape. The north parking lot is a gateway to our new library, so to speak. And I think it's timely that something be done about this mess. In a short, I sent a second email to Manager Fieldman saying that if something can't be done to remove these back to the property owners that put these receptacles there, that they entertain taking on bigger receptacles or having twice a week pickup, because it seems as though they pick up on Tuesdays or Wednesday mornings, but by Tuesdays, which was a Tuesday when I was there, some of the containers are inadequate. So I beseech you, as a commission, as a council, to give direction to the village manager and the appropriate agencies within our village to address this, not tomorrow, not next week, but immediately. So I guess that's tomorrow. So thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Roble. And I know a number of folks did respond to your messages and did receive that, including the pictures. And in terms of communicating with some of the business owners and practices with respect to garbage, that's certainly something we can follow up on. With respect to the enclosure, I know that Commissioner Barnett had a particularly insightful response. I don't know if, Commissioner, you wanted to share some of that with the rest of the public so they could have an insight into some of your comments about the enclosure aspect?
Sure. Get it in front of me, Mayor. I'm sorry, I didn't know it was coming. So the issue that Bill brings up is one that he accurately describes has been going on for some time. And we sort of have 3 places in town where there's a similar kind of a condition. And we started with try to address that, the first instance near the parking garage. Some of you may be familiar with the dumpster enclosure there. The process of working through the existing conditions, which were not as well known as many of us would wish in terms of underground, the various management and operating agreements relative to the garbage haulers, their customers, the individual businesses, downtown management, and the village, proved more complicated than we thought. And while we did get the dumpster up, or the enclosure up, once it was up, it was frankly not used very well. Existing users of that dumpster, which are primarily Main Street businesses, struggled with getting to the point where they could effectively manage the process, as crazy as that sounds, of getting their garbage thrown away, getting the doors closed, getting the lid shut, that kind of a thing. We have, in the last probably 4 to 6 months, which may be a function of the weather change, gotten to where I believe we are doing more pickups than before, and the users are doing a better job. But that whole process, believe it or not, took us, 3 years, something like that, and ended with something that frankly was not what we'd hoped. It was less than we'd hoped. So that has made us all gun shy, perhaps is the best way to put it, about spending a big chunk of village money to build another such enclosure if our experience with the first one was not great. So I think all of us up here, certainly all in downtown management and all on our staff, are aware of the problem and recognize it as being a problem. But it's easier said than done, unless you really think you're going to start just handing out tickets, which is certainly one thing we could do. But we try mightily, sometimes more successfully than others, to work through the process of inclusion and teamwork, and that hasn't gone well. And so where that situation stands is that, Bill, what you point out, we're all aware of. It's a problem. It shouldn't be that way. Our logical next step is to try and, once again, appeal to the users to do a better job. But we're all a little gun shy about making a big investment in something that the first time around did not work as well as we'd hoped. So.
Thank you for sharing that, Commissioner. Any other questions or comments of a general nature from members of the audience?
Hi, Scott Oberly, pastor at First Congregational United Church of Christ, and
Good evening.
wanted to thank all of you for your service to the community. I'm bringing a letter from 17 of the 22 communities of faith of Downers Grove. I know that on your agenda tonight is to discuss the stormwater fees to non-for-profits. I'd like to share that briefly. It's not very long, if I might.
Can you do that now, or you can do it when we get to that point in our agenda?
If I can, I don't know I can stay that long. on the
I figured
agenda.
that's probably why you would
I
get
will,
up there.
I will.
The chair will exercise discretion. Please proceed.
Thank you. October is the time for crafting budgets and fiscal planning and campaign elections. Over the past several years, many in our faith community have sought and engaged the village council in stormwater fee imposed officially to all non-for-profit groups, including Downers Grove communities of faith. The premise of the initiative to include churches was that Downers Grove as a community has stormwater problems. We sit in a location that has a low elevation in DuPage County, and collectively as a community have our fair share of water issues, particularly in storms, and that all land parcels, including non-for-profits, contribute to this problem. Therefore, they should all share in the cost of solutions. The first objection with this rationale that the churches of this community have is that the council seems to be looking at the churches as land parcels that seemingly offer no other communal benefit. While none of the council members have verbalized this publicly, it is clear that the value the council places on houses of worship in terms of communal benefit is equivalent to area businesses or private residents. We feel quite the opposite is true. As the village continues to seek fiscal responsibility and cuts are made to programs like Meals on Wheels or senior citizens assistance transports and the like, churches have sought to fill the gaps. It is the churches who can increasingly shoulder the growing divide of persons living on the edge of sustainability as the gap between rich and poor in our nation continues to widen. The number of residents utilizing our shelters, food pantries, and assistance ministry are growing more and more each month, and many of them with families and children. While the initial one-year increase may not have a dramatic effect on our ability to handle these growing needs, in the course of increases over the next 15 years, there's no shadow of a doubt that the collective stormwater fees to our churches will significantly reduce our ability to minister in this community. For some of our churches, this will have an overall impact on the abilities to continue ministry as they do today. The second objection is that this fee penalizes people of faith in Downers Grove who reside in this community to pay their own individual stormwater fees through their Downers Grove water bills, and then are asked to contribute again through tithes and gifts to their faith communities. Any Downers Grove resident who attends our churches, and there are many, statistically half of all residents, are being double burdened by this fee imposed on churches. We don't see this as fair sharing, but singling out of churchgoers to pay more than their fair share. The final objection we will collectively raise is the breach of longstanding constitutional separation of church and state. By taxing, quotation marks there, the churches with a shared civic utility benefit the village, opening the door to a host of other services. We are wondering what will follow: police service, fire, or street maintenance. These are all shared civic services, yet they have been civic and never entered into the religious sphere. With federal, state, and local governments looking for alternative sources of revenue, we believe the council is making an error by combining the civic and faith spheres in ways that they have not been for the past 200 years. We ask the council to vote to make the change to exempt the churches and houses of worship at your council meetings in the next month. And I know that you all are talking about this. Again, there are 17 churches here. We started off with 5. I want to emphasize that we are growing in our unity on this issue. I hope to have all 22 of us here. But I also am very encouraged that you are talking about this and considering looking at repealing that. And we're just prayerful that you would hear our voice in that, and all we can ask is your considerations, but I sure hope you will consider that as you're making the 2015 budget. I'll leave a copy here for each of you. Thank you for your time.
Thank you. Thank you for being here, and thank you. Okay, now you realize you're going to have to do that for every speaker for the rest of the night now. No one can leave. Thank you for being here. We appreciate that, and we've enjoyed continuing to engage in the dialogue on this topic. Good evening. Welcome.
Good evening. My name is Teresa Barron-Kulat. I live at 4440 Saratoga Avenue, and I own a small business that's located at 5116 Forest Avenue, both here in Downers Grove. I've been a resident for 22 years and a business owner here for the last 10. I'm here to speak very briefly on 3 topics. First is I would like to acknowledge and appreciate the 15-minute green parking spaces. I have found them to be quite helpful, and I hope that they are helping businesses as people who otherwise might not stop and pick up something at the Busy Bee or at the bookstore actually can find a spot, can get in and get out, and hopefully they're generating more revenue. So that's my thank you very much for that one, whoever was responsible. Secondly, I'd like to give you folks an update on the efforts to create a Maple Avenue Historic District and hopefully take efforts to save the Edwards home. Doug Gilbert, who is an architect who specializes in preservation, he was part of the team that did the historic survey here in Downers Grove last year, shared his experience last week on September 30th with the residents of the area. He answered questions. About 35 people attended. And tomorrow evening, which is October 8th, there will be another meeting to address this issue with the residents. Some of the conversation that night drifted into areas that should be of concern to the board and relates to the district and the Edwards House, namely concerns about traffic congestion, stormwater, and the tree canopy. We were not able to answer some questions, but just to let you know that those were some of the issues that are related to that which they're discussing. Which brings me to my final comment, and that is the potential police station at Ogden and Lacey. On behalf of those residents in Downers Grove who would like to keep the grove, the tree aspect of Downers Grove in our town, I would respectfully ask that we, as a village, in building this new facility, be mindful and that you save as many of the mature trees as possible on that parcel. Clear cutting will negatively impact the neighborhood, and I believe that the residents of this town do care about trees and that the trees can help with the stormwater impact. And that's it. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Appreciate you sharing that update with us, and thanks for being here tonight and sharing your comments with us as well. Any other questions or comments of a general nature from any members of the audience? Good evening.
Good evening, Mayor, Council. My name is Bob Peterson. I live at 6861 Camden Road. I also am the owner of Leibenguth Moving and Storage, who's been in Downers Grove for the last 82 years. And basically, I'm here again just to try to survive and to join in with the Fire Prevention Week. Mr. Leibenguth, the founder of the business, well, actually my partner, has been an assistant chief of Downers Grove for probably 30 to 35 years. I've been on the department myself 25 years and proud of it. And now I'm running the business and trying to survive, stay alive because of my signs. My signs face the railroad. I have a unique situation that nobody else in Downers Grove has of facing the railroad with railroad traffic. And my major problem is trying to survive in business by removing my signs, which would be a tremendous impact on my business financially. I've already borrowed money during the recession to stay alive, And so far, I'm paying back a little bit of that money, and haven't done so, but I'm working on it. But to cut my business is going to be a hardship for my family. I got kids I got to put through school, and I think some of the businesses that I have talked to already, which are Teddy's Red Hots, Econotemp, JR's Restaurant, Hendrick's Piano, Safe Tea Storage, Eagle Storage, and there's one little beauty salon, have already noticed a drop in business. And without my signs, which is a major factor, especially under my unique situation, which I'm the only one in Downers Grove left, having the sign face the railroad tracks, and having Downers Grove telling me that the railroad is not a public right-of-way, it's private, so I can't have a sign, which is a big factor of my business. And without that, I don't see to survive more than maybe 1 to 2 years. I would like to have the business turned over to my son to run it another 40, 50 years, if I can do that. Appreciate it, and thank you.
Thank you for being here again. Other questions or comments from members of the audience? Questions or comments of a general nature with respect to items not appearing on tonight's agenda?
Hello, I'm
Good evening.
Jerry Filio at 1454 Arrowwood Lane. I'm going out of my box to support this gentleman's business. Really not sure why this would be an issue. If you look at most of the variation comments, it's usually, they're all related to safety. This has absolutely nothing to do with safety. The train engineer is not going to be distracted. He or she's probably seen it a couple hundred times. I really don't understand why this would be an issue. I understand the everything about the signage code. I've been studying this for an extremely long time. If you look at the CODA plan, we all paid $230,000 for the 1999 master plan. I really don't, and the 2005 code, I really don't see what the issue would be on this sign. So I really think that this should be allowed. Thank you.
Thank you. And that item will actually be on the agenda later tonight. Other questions or comments of a general nature with respect to items not appearing on tonight's agenda? Hearing nothing further, that'll bring us to item 5 on our agenda, which pertains to council member reports. This is an opportunity for council members to share items of interest and goings-on in the community with the rest of the community. I'll start tonight with Commissioner Barnett.
I have no report, Mayor.
Thank you, sir. Commissioner Olson.
No report.
Commissioner Newstead.
Thank you, Mayor. We have a nice crowd tonight, so I always like to advertise a few things that we have on our website. Right on the front page, there's 2 very important tabs, Network with Us and Stay Connected. Both of those 2 spots allow residents and visitors to see what's happening and be up to date with our village happenings. Specifically, the community-wide notification under Stay Connected allows people to get community-wide notifications for things in your neighborhood and around town. It's a great resource, and it allows us to be even more communicative with our residents and neighbors. So check that out and sign up if you are able. Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you, Commissioner. Commissioner Jose.
No report, Mayor. Thank you.
Commissioner Rankin.
No report, Mayor. Thanks.
You sure?
I am.
Commissioner Durkin.
Yeah, thank you, Mayor. Just a quick reminder, we have our upcoming budget meeting this Saturday at Fire Station 2. Starts at 8 o'clock. Ask all those that possibly can to please tune in. Watch it on YouTube. If you can't make it Saturday, or if you're able, please attend. This is where all the discussions begin on what expenses we are going to incur as a village, what rates we're going to charge for various fees, including possibly stormwater. So if you can, please pay attention to this. Please get back to each one of us or one of us alone regarding your thoughts, regarding the discussions of the proposed budget, because we don't seem, in my humble opinion, to get enough feedback from the residents regarding our budgets. So if you can, Station 2, 8 o'clock on Saturday. Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you. And of course, you also remind everybody that street sweeping is about to start, right?
Yes, street sweeping. Not a leaf program, but street sweeping, fall cleanup.
Thank you. It begins on Saturday, October 4th.
Yeah.
It's already started.
Thanks.
All right, well, everyone else has reported out the items that I think need to be reported out, so I won't add to the discussion. We'll move on to item 6, which is Relegated to public hearings, we have no public hearings tonight, so we'll go right to item 7, which is the consent agenda. And I will ask for a motion to approve the consent agenda as presented.
So moved.
Second.
Any questions or comments from any members of the audience with respect to any items on the consent agenda? Any questions or comments from any members of the village council? Hearing none, may I have a roll call, please?
Commissioner Newstead? Aye. Commissioner Durkin?
Aye.
Commissioner Jose?
Aye.
Commissioner Olson?
Aye.
Commissioner Rankin?
Aye.
Commissioner Barnett?
Aye.
Mayor Tully?
Aye. Consent agenda passes unanimously. That brings us to the active agenda. We have no items on our active agenda tonight, so we will go right to our first reading or our workshop agenda item, which is relegated to items for presentation, discussion purposes only, action potentially at a future point in time. We have one item to be presented tonight for discussion and consideration. As is customary, I'll ask the village manager to tap someone to introduce this for us.
And I will tap our Public Works Director, Nan Newland, to present the only item on tonight's first reading agenda.
Good evening.
Good evening, Mayor and Council. Tonight I'm presenting a resolution to authorize approval of an agreement for the automatic meter reading replacement project with Aclara Technologies, LLC of Hazelwood, Missouri, in the amount of $1,854,923.75. This is what these meter transmission units look like. The existing units are on the right. The replacement unit is very similar. It's on the left, it's slightly smaller. I don't know if you can see in the picture, right on top of each one is a pencil. So that gives you some indication of what these look like. Every home in the village and business has one that has a water meter. The project consists of the replacement of 15,050 of these meter transmission units in the village's system beginning January of 2015. These units rely on an internal battery that has a finite lifespan. They were installed in the years 2002 and 2003 throughout the village, and the batteries are beginning to fail. As they fail, they become unreliable, and they also stop transmitting, so that leads us to more estimated reads in our water billing. This is a diagram of kind of how the system works. It's a wireless system. As I said, each building that has a water meter on it has one of these installed on the outside of the building. This meter, what it's doing is reading the water meter that's in that property, and it's transmitting it to there's a lot of acronyms here, so I want to make sure I get it right. 14 data collection units, which are the poles you see. That's where the wireless readings are coming to. They're collected by those, and those are then transmitted to our network, which downloads it into our water readings that we transmit, turn into water bills. This is all, as I said, a wireless system, and we replaced the 14 data collection units in 2013. Let me go to the next slide and talk about the scope of the project. This will be about a year-long project. The scope includes installing about 300 of these units each week throughout the village. It includes professional services for project management from Aclara. They're going to handle the logistics, and they're going to work with village staff as a team on project communication. As we will be visiting each home, each property throughout the village. We'll have extensive communication, and we'll have a communication plan that we will work on with Aclara. This is a multi-departmental project. It involves staff from finance, business technology, public works, legal, and communications. And as I said, we'll be working closely with them on all aspects of the project, especially including communications, which will be handled as a partnership between Aclara and the village. We will be developing messaging that'll go out before any work goes on. Water customers will be notified when work is planned to happen, probably within the week of that actual work. There will not be any service or billing disruptions, and we will develop a system to resolve any disputes that may arise because of the difference between estimated reads and what the reads will be when we get the new units installed. The village will oversee the content of all communication that goes on with our residents. The last slide, we just wanted to show, we will be working with Aclara, as we said, on communication, and they will have trained personnel working. Is there one more? What they've described to us is there will be primarily one service technician and one supervisor working throughout the village. So we're going to get to know them well throughout the project. They will be wearing a uniform, they'll be well identified, they'll have the proper credentials, and there will be signage on their vehicle. They will, in the majority of cases, approach a home. They will not need to go into the majority of homes. We estimate approximately 10, maybe as much as 20% of the homes, they may need access to go into the home to make the connection to the meter in the cases where the wiring is not sufficient to do it from the outside of the home. In that case, Aclara will be working to contact and make appointments with the residents and to conduct those follow-up inspections. And the village will be assisting with that where we need to, where they're having difficulty communicating with residents or getting appointments to go into their homes. Aclara, as I said, will manage this process and establish a call center and make contact with all of our water customers. Will include all manners of communication, whether it be social media, letters, reverse 911 type calls, door hangers, and personal calls to residents. So I just wanted to conclude and just wrap up. Using our multi-departmental team, we prepared a request for qualifications. We have a system in place now. The point of this is to replace the reading devices. We issued an RFQ to see in the technology that's out there what would best meet our needs to go to the next step with the replacement. We issued an RFQ to identify vendors that would best meet our needs and determined that Aclara, who is our current provider, has proposed a solution that best meets our needs, provides the best product and most continuity with the system that we currently have in place and have invested in. We also conducted a competitive pricing analysis with communities that have installed the same systems and found the price from Aclara to be very competitive. We determined the pricing structure is competitive market rates. And with that, staff recommends approval of this contract with Aclara, and I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Thank you very much for the presentation. My understanding is that the technology that these meters use is substantially more advanced than, particularly the battery technology is substantially more advanced, as one might expect, than what was implemented over a decade ago.
Yes, it is. The current devices have one battery. The new devices will have two batteries, and they expect to have a longer life than the current devices we have.
Due to advances in battery technology, so this should be something that we hopefully won't be looking at again. And for the purpose of many people in this room, won't see it again. Thank you. Questions or comments from members of the audience? Questions or comments from the Village Council? Commissioner Durkin?
Yeah, thank you, Mayor. As I read this is really coming out of the fiscal 15 budget. We're proposing $2 million for this expense.
Yes.
But we're proposing it today. So when would the actual contract purchase be concluded?
It'll be concluded at the end of 2015.
No, I'm sorry, but when do we sign the contract so they start the work? Because you're not going to wait till the end of 2015 to start the work. You're going to do it.
We need to start our planning now and get our communication plan or installation plan in process.
It would be approved next week, according to the schedule, signed, executed this fiscal year. What's important to note about budgeting is, yes, it's tied to a specific budget year, but it's really more tied to our multi-year water rate plan. This was one of the investments that was included in that 4-year plan. It falls across 2 fiscal years. It was a planned expense and has been planned since 2010.
Okay. Do we know what the projected revenue is going to be, the increase in revenue, when we have accurate reading meters?
There should.
We don't foresee a change in revenue. We've been making estimated reads based on history of billing.
The current system is accurate. The new system should be just as accurate. The only variability is in the estimated reads that are taking place in this short window when the existing units are failing. So there should not be a measurable increase nor decrease in revenue.
Right, so the advantage to these, just to pick up on that comment, is not that we're going to be seeing increased accuracy. It's just the existing units have outlived their expected lifespan, and the new units are expected to last longer due to advances in technology.
Correct.
Other questions or comments, Commissioner Rankin?
So when we're developing this communications plan, we're going to be able to give people expectations of you're going to be receiving a phone call, and you know, they may want to go in your house, so they understand that that's a possibility?
We will lay that groundwork at the very beginning of the project. The people, they won't go into the home the same day they would come to put it on the outside. If they come on the outside and identify that they need to come in the home, they will go back to their office, make the follow-up communication, and set an appointment, so they won't be surprising anyone
Good, yeah.
with visits.
And I know that some service companies now, before a tech comes out, they send like a photo of the people that might be coming. So if it's the same folks that are going to always be working, that might be a good part of that communication plan, so people know who's showing up at their door. Okay.
If Uber and Lyft can do it, we can probably figure out how to do it. Commissioner Sapp?
Is this the first incarnation of this specific MTU, or has this product been used in other communities? So we know it's kind of, all the bugs are worked out of it. We're not the first trial of this particular unit.
This is an evolving technology. There are other communities that have this replacement unit. We were one of the early initiators, and as people initiated later, they have been installing this technology.
And have we been still putting in the old Star units in like new construction homes up until now, or have they already switched over to the new
We've
unit?
switched over to newer units.
Have we
yes.
experienced any issues with the new units and installation or anything? It's pretty much the wiring goes in and
No, we have not
transmission goes
experienced
out.
any problems.
Great. I agree with Commissioner Rankin. I think the communication plan will be key. As we just talked about a little earlier, we have a lot of outlets for communication. Let's use them all and maybe even come up with some new ones and see what we can do. So, thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner. Other questions or comments? Very good. Thank you for the presentation.
That ends our first reading tonight, Mayor. Thank you.
All right, thank you very much. Brings us to item 10, the mayor's report. You have a couple of items to take care of on the mayor's report. First, I just want to update the community as well as my colleagues with respect to the latest and greatest news out of the DuPage County Stormwater Committee. As many folks know, I serve as the District 3 municipal representative to the DuPage County Stormwater Committee, which is made up of members of half municipal representatives from various districts in DuPage County and half DuPage County board members. Three things of importance to note. We have been following the floodplain mapping update progress, and I've been reporting on that progress periodically here. I wanted to let everyone know that the Illinois State Water Survey estimates that preliminary floodplain maps will be released in the spring of 2015. The approximate post-processing schedule for the floodplain maps is shown, or is available on a FEMA graphic that's, I believe, on their website. Assuming that the post-processing goes smoothly, the maps could go effective 12 to 14 months after the release of the preliminary maps, which would be summer of 2016. So this has been an ongoing progress, and a lot of different communities and individuals have been following the mapping because it has important impact to many people in many communities. And I just want to update on everyone as to where that process is, and that's being shepherded through by DuPage County. The other thing I want to share is that, and I know our staff is already aware of it, but DuPage County is also sponsoring water quality improvement program grants. And the deadline for those project application submittals is Friday, December 19th. The thing that folks should take note of here is that both organizations and individuals are eligible to apply for this financial assistance. Projects are prioritized on an evaluation of project merit, including consideration of overall water quality benefit, wetland and riparian area enhancement, educational aspects, regional benefits, dedicated funding, and long-term management for the project. So I just wanted to, I know we're well aware of this and have different projects that we have considered for submission for this grant funding from the county, but want to let others know that businesses and individuals and other organizations within our community also have this venue available to them, should they choose to pursue it. And the deadline for those applications is December 19th. DuPage County website, stormwater management segment of their website has more information about that process. And then last, I just wanted to share with everyone a process that I know we have participated in at multiple different levels, both at the elected official stage and also at the staff stage. And that is DuPage County has been undertaking a fairly thorough survey assessment of what stormwater needs are throughout DuPage County. They have engaged a number of different organizations, individuals, municipalities, other government entities throughout the entire county, and district meetings have been held in all 6 districts. 30 different municipalities have provided input to that process, including Downers Grove. County staff has now analyzed all the results from the survey and has prepared a report that summarizes everything that the survey that the county has conducted has found. They have tried to rank some of the needs that have been identified from the various participants in the study. I won't take the time to go through it here, but to the extent that we don't have this available on our website, we can make it available to anyone who's interested. It's full of lots of charts and graphs and information about what the various stakeholders in DuPage County have stated are important issues to them when it comes to stormwater. Importantly, next steps. Next steps are the DuPage County Stormwater Committee has acknowledged receipt of the survey responses. There will now be countywide meetings with municipalities such as Downers Grove to discuss the survey results. DuPage County will host that meeting. This is our opportunity to provide additional input in terms of what we think of the priorities and to make sure that our voice is heard. Other organizations have that same opportunity. The inclusion of survey results and services will be put into a draft program assessment. This is basically going to be their document where DuPage County is going to outline what they think that a stormwater program will look like in DuPage County in terms of projects and priorities. A draft program assessment will be brought back to the Stormwater Committee probably in November for approval to go to public comment. Then there will be what I expect a fairly lengthy public comment period. And then the final program assessment is estimated to come back to the DuPage County Stormwater Committee in January of 2015. After all that, and this is important, the county then plans to begin discussing financing. And what they mean by that is, having identified what the needs are based on the input they received during the survey, the county will then have some idea of what the costs will be, and they will entertain discussions about how to pay for those projects. That will obviously be a very important topic. It was, I think, a subject that came up earlier before the projects were identified, and there was a fair amount of public interest in that subject. I just wanted to make sure everybody was aware of that and what the expected timing is, so those stakeholders, individuals, organizations, residents that have an interest in how DuPage County handles and pays for stormwater projects throughout the county can be engaged and have their voices heard. So there'll be more on that as some of these other dates draw near, but I'll make sure that we can make this report. I'm sure it's on the DuPage County website, but we can probably make it available here so that folks don't need to go find it. There's a few more pages to the county website than ours. It might be easier to find it on our website. One more thing before I get to the last item, and this pertains to a liquor license application that is being placed on file as of today. The village has received an application for an on-premise beer and wine liquor license from Bogies Indoor Golf Club, LLC, doing business as Bogies Indoor Golf Club, located at 2091 West 63rd Street. Pursuant to Section 3-12 of the Liquor Control Ordinance, a public hearing for a liquor license application may be waived. The application must be placed on file for a minimum of 2 weeks, subject to public comment, prior to the issuance of the new license. So at this time, as the Liquor Commissioner of the Village of Downers Grove, I am placing this application on file in the Village Clerk's office. Barring any objections, once the 2-week waiting period is passed, a liquor license shall be issued to Bogies Indoor Golf Club, LLC, doing business as Bogies Indoor Golf Club, located at 2091 West 63rd Street. And last but not least, at our last meeting in September, we had a number of appointments and reappointments to various boards and commissions that we passed. There was one recommended appointment that the individual, at his request, asked us to hold off on it because he wanted to make sure that everything was okay with his employer. That's all been cleared, everything is fine, so we're now bringing forward that final appointment so we can round out the field from what we started in September. So at this point in time, I'd like to ask the village clerk to please read the resolution for appointment of that individual to a board or commission.
A resolution appointing Timothy Carter to the Transportation and Parking Commission. Whereas Mayor Tully has appointed Timothy Carter to the Transportation and Parking Commission, now therefore be it resolved that the Village Council of the Village of Downers Grove does hereby confirm the appointment of Timothy Carter to the Transportation and Parking Commission to a 3-year term expiring August 31, 2017.
Thank you. Do I have a motion to make that appointment?
So moved.
Second.
Any questions or comments from any members of the village council? Questions or comments from members of the audience? Have a roll call, please.
Commissioner Newstead?
Aye.
Commissioner Durkin?
Aye.
Commissioner Jose?
Aye.
Commissioner Olson?
Aye.
Commissioner Rankin?
Aye.
Commissioner Barnett?
Aye.
Mayor Tully?
Aye, the appointment is approved, and our thanks to Mr. Carter for serving in that capacity. It's an important role on the Board of Commission. That ends the mayor's report. That brings us to item 11, our manager's report. Mr. Fieldman?
No report tonight, Mayor.
Thank you, sir. That brings us to item 12, the attorney's report. Ms. Petrarca? No report. Very good. That brings us to item 13, council member new business. Folks who were watching and following along in September may recall at a prior meeting, several members of the village council asked for different items to be placed on a new business agenda for tonight. We have 4 items tonight, A, B, C, and D. What I'm going to do is ask the principal proponent or sponsor of each of those new business items to introduce it for discussion, and then we can talk about it and see where we may go from there. So I will begin with, Commissioner Olson and Commissioner Durkin with respect to the sign ordinance text amendment, if either one of you want to.
Yeah, happy to talk about it. This is an amendment that was discussed previously. The purpose of this item of new business would be to place to begin a process to go through the Plan Commission and then back to the Village Council to have a text amendment that would allow businesses to have signs along the public right-of-way along the railroad tracks, or along the railroad right-of-way. So with that, I will move this item, move that we consider, I guess the motion is to direct the Plan Commission to consider this amendment to the sign ordinance.
Text amendment to the sign ordinance to treat railroad right-of-way facing signage the same as vehicular right-of-way signage facing signage.
Exactly right. I'll make that motion.
And I'll second it.
All right, we have a motion and a second. Is there any discussion?
Yeah, I will start, Mayor. I know that this was before us in the past. It died for a lack of second. Why am I seconding it today? I think it's very simple. After reviewing this and getting to understand a little bit better than I did at the day that Commissioner Olson brought it forward, I think the one thing that I'm interested in knowing and why I would like to see this go before the commission is simply because let me get it here. Currently, the zoning ordinance permit wall signs to be located along a public roadway or drivable right-of-way. The BNSF right-of-way does not qualify as a public roadway or drivable right-of-way. Basically, the BNSF right-of-way is not being recognized at all. And that's where I would like to get a better definition on that. Knowing that this is the one business that has come before us, knowing that there's a number of miles of track within our community, and that there's possible other businesses that could possibly come before us either at a later date or next week or whatever for such signs, I would like to see it move forward and give it the proper hearing.
I'll just add what I said last time that this was presented, although it didn't go any further for lack of a second, because as the mayor, I can't make motions or second motions. But I don't really see the distinction between the rules for a sign facing a railroad right-of-way or a vehicular right-of-way. The text amendment is very simple. The impact is pretty negligible. And really what this motion does is directs the Planning Commission to consider the text amendment. I don't see any reason not to have that considered. So as I said before, if the motion was made and seconded, I would support it. Commissioner?
I think it needs to be pointed out that this particular text amendment, as it's presented, will not help the business owner that was before us tonight. It will change the definition of the right-of-way for the train line, but this will not bring his sign into compliance. The process is important. We have had a process since 2005. It's 9 years of sign ordinance compliance. This particular business that spoke tonight and every other business in town has gone through that process. There's a variation process that they can go before the Zoning Board of Appeals. Our staff has bent over backwards for many sign applicants to help work with them, find ways to still promote and encourage business in Downers Grove, this resident and business owner as well. There are options out there. This text amendment will not help the moving company. The fact that we talked about it a couple weeks ago and we're back tonight, it seems like we're just kind of revisiting something that isn't really going to solve the problem that we heard of tonight. That's all I have tonight,
I don't know if I completely agree with that. It may not say this sign, but what I heard the business owner state is that not having any sign facing the railroad has an impact upon that business. And while it may not be this particular sign, a sign, I think would actually help this business and potentially others. And I just also think that this is a good message to the business community that we are, as we've said we were going to be over the last decade, more flexible in terms of entertaining potential amendments to the sign ordinance where it makes sense. These are not stone tablets carved in, these are not stone tablets from Mount Sinai. These are something that I think when circumstances dictate, we ought to consider it. This motion is simply to present it to the Plan Commission for further discussion, to get more public input on it, more information. There may be those who think that further discussion of it isn't going to get anywhere. Maybe so, maybe not. But I think there is some benefit to it. Commissioner?
Mayor, I'd just like to agree with what you just stated. I think there is value in having this discussion, and I do agree that it does send a message to the business community. I think the business owner before us mentioned several businesses which previously had signs along the railroad right-of-way, and I think would enjoy and appreciate the opportunity to once again display their business name to folks who use the railroad right-of-way. So I appreciate the business owner coming to us. I think that this is part of the process that we should undertake as a community and as a council to listen and to respond and to appropriately address concerns that come up. And I think the flexibility here does send a positive message. At the last time this was discussed, Commissioner Jose mentioned that he was in favor of looking at the sign ordinance more comprehensively. I agree with Commissioner Jose. I think this is a topic that was an ordinance that was passed in 2005. Mayor, I think you may have been up here at that time, but the rest of us, I believe, were not. And I think it does warrant that revisiting. But at this time, I think this is a very minor amendment, and I'd appreciate the opportunity for it to go through a process through the Plan Commission and then on to back to this body for even additional discussion and additional insight that could be provided through that process. So, thanks for the opportunity.
Thanks, Commissioner. Commissioner Barnett?
Thanks, Mayor. Couple of questions. Have any of the businesses along railroad tracks been through the ZBA process of appeal?
No.
So one of the challenges I have, we said a lot of things that are a little bit like motherhood and apple pie. It's awfully hard to disagree with flexibility and interest in helping people and that kind of stuff. But one of the messages that would come out is that the process that we have that others are currently actually in is not necessary if certain conditions, and I don't even know how you define what those are, appear. We have some people right now who are in the same kind of a condition of having signs that are not in compliance, not along the railroad per se, which are currently engaged in the ZBA process, and that is the process that exists. So one of the messages that I would be reluctant to send to the business community is we don't really know what set of rules or conditions would cause you to have to go through ZBA versus those that might cause you to not have to go through ZBA. I'm not a fan of ZBA, as people up here know and those that follow, but it is the process we have, and I'm reluctant to make changes skipping the process, if you will. Another question I have is this then also a dais direction to suspend enforcement? We have a fairly aggressive enforcement process in place right now because, frankly, we're a decade into this. And, it strikes me as the obvious reason is the Liebenguth condition, and that's fine. But would that also then, such a direction also say, well, let's stop enforcement? And would it be let's stop enforcement only along railroad tracks or let's stop enforcement elsewhere? The process is important. I would agree that it's important, and I guess I'm just not comfortable short-circuiting it, which is kind of what this feels like.
I don't see any reason why we need to stop enforcement across the board. We're just talking about a very narrow change, probably something that should have been written that way in the first place. And you know, there are some changes we make to our ordinances where everyone just looks at it, and it's something that just needs to be fixed, and it gets done without a whole lot of fanfare. There are other things that sometimes it actually takes a real-world situation to identify something that raises circumstances that might cause change. The process itself may change. Just because other people have gone through ZBA as the final arbiter of certain issues doesn't mean that that's the way it always has to be. There could be a case made that perhaps that isn't the way it should be. When is the right time to make a change? I think reasonable people could disagree that you should wait until enforcement is complete, and a week later make changes. There's an unfairness to that too. I don't think there's any good time to make changes. I think there's going to be someone out there who's going to cry foul no matter what, based on the timing. But this one is just, I think, very narrow, very focused. It just deals with mirroring something that's already in the ordinance, which is signage for vehicular right-of-ways. This is simply a rail right-of-way. I just personally, I don't see the difference, and no one's explained it to me yet. And we've talked about this 3 or 4 times, and no one's yet explained to me what the difference is. It seems to be hung up on the process.
Mayor, I can think of one difference, and the one difference is the one that was pointed out today, which is along the distraction factor, which is a major point of why we have our sign ordinance, along vehicular rights-of-way for drivers. We want to prevent drivers from being distracted and operating their vehicles unsafely. That factor, I think, doesn't apply along railroad.
Except maybe for the guy driving the train, that's about it.
But, to me, that is an even further reason why this change just makes sense.
Well, obviously we have...
I just wanted to investigate it. That's why I said
that. Obviously, there's a difference of opinion here, and that's
I understand
fine.
that.
That's fine, but just to be clear, all we're talking about is asking that it be sent to the Plan Commission for discussion. Correct. Adopting a text amendment as we speak. Commissioner Barnett raises a good question about how enforcement would be handled. I think that's probably a staff issue that we don't need to get into right now.
Not that discussion here.
Commissioner.
Thank you, Mayor. As Commissioner Olson pointed out, I do think that we should take a more comprehensive look at the sign ordinance if we're going to look at it. Liebenguth is hardly the first business to come before this council in the last 9 years with issues with the sign ordinance, whether it be right here at the podium on a Tuesday or individually with some commissioner, mayor, or another. As Commissioner Olson also pointed out, the composition of the council was much different back in 2005. In addition to the mayor, perhaps Commissioner Durkin was on the dais. I could be wrong. But it could be that a lot of the value determinations that were made in 2005 would be different now in 2014. There are any number of folks that recently have expressed problems, whether it be the Fry's issue with District 99 with their request for certain signage. I think if we're going to look at this, it needs to be on a holistic approach rather than sort of taking a one-off, despite the fact that it might be something that's a very minor change in terms of the text of the code. It could have a larger impact. And I think there are a lot of folks that are out there that have relied to their detriment on the ordinance as it's currently drafted by coming into compliance with it. And if we're going to change it, then let's do it on a larger scale, or at least consider things on a larger scale before simply making tweaks here and there based on certain constituencies or how loud they may protest.
Commissioner Rankin?
I'm going to repeat some of the same comments I had the last time that this was brought up. I don't necessarily have a problem with the concept of allowing a sign on the railroad right-of-way, and I completely understand and empathize with Mr. Peterson about the value of good advertising. I just don't really think it's fair, kind of as Commissioner Barnett pointed out, to allow Mr. Peterson to pursue another process when we've told all these other business owners that they have to pursue another road. And, you know, I understand also as a business owner petitioning a neighboring community for our business to do something. You really need to, it's frustrating not knowing what the rules are, and if there's different rules for different people, that's frustrating as a business owner, not knowing what to expect. And I think it's important that we keep things consistent. And and that we don't have different avenues for different businesses. So I would, I know that this has been seconded, but I think it would have been better to go through the ZBA and follow the process that's in place, but that's just my 2 cents.
Thanks, Commissioner.
Can I just throw a couple numbers out there? We have a great table in our information for tonight about the number of signs and number of complying signs. Total number of signs, 2,250. Properties complying, 2,121. It's 94% over the life of the sign ordinance. There are 57 of the remaining 129 that have no attempt to comply with regulations. There are 72 that are either in for applications and/or have permits and they haven't installed their signs. I think that's a success story. We have implemented in 2005, and as Commissioner Olson said, many of us did not approve or vote for the sign ordinance, but we have had a process. We've had a process for 10 years. This is not a new issue. You know, Liebenguth didn't hear about this year. It's been up and coming. Our village communications has been very strong. We've been allowing residents to come in, residents and businesses to come in and talk to us about their signs. 94% compliance is a huge number on anything in municipal government, and I think we're achieving the right numbers here. The message that I'm seeing here is that those 2,121 complying properties are going to say, hey, I followed the rules, and now you're going to change them. They're not all equal, you're right. It's not all fair, but this is the ordinance that we have to work with. This council needs to, along with what Commissioner Jose said, either comprehensively change the whole thing, or I think it would have been more appropriate if we had heard a text amendment during the compliance period. We may have had a different situation, but we are where we are now, and we're trying to have properties come into compliance. Thank you, Mayor.
Mayor, can I make a comment?
Sure. This is the third one.
Well,
Go ahead.
With your indulgence.
I'm indulging, go ahead.
Thank you. Commissioner Neustadt brings up an interesting point about the compliance, and I just note that every property in that 2,100 and change that has complied with the sign ordinance, does that mean these people like the sign ordinance? Does that mean these people, or these businesses, largely business owners, would change their signs would like a change to the ordinance? I think it does. I think that these businesses, many of them have come into compliance. Many of them have taken down a sign. Okay, sure, they're in compliance with the ordinance. But do they desire to be able to advertise to businesses in different ways? I think the answer is yes. So to me, I think that it's great that businesses in this community are following the law. I think that's, admirable. I think the idea that we can change an ordinance and be flexible is something that's important. And I agree that looking at it comprehensively is a great idea. This is just one small step. And I do intend to bring this up in the next long-range planning session as a more comprehensive overview, because frankly, I'm concerned from the perspective of the business community that our sign ordinance is limiting the number of businesses that wish to stay in our community, and perhaps even limiting the number of businesses we can attract to our community. So with that, I don't need to make any more comments. Thank you, Mayor.
Commissioner Durkin and Commissioner Barnett.
Oh, thank you. I just for the record, so people watching and those in our audience know, and I'm going to read this right from the electronic sheets, what used to be green sheets. If the proposed amendment were ultimately approved, the petitioner would still be required to paint over the existing wall sign and replace it with a smaller wall-mounted sign. Additionally, the petitioner would be required to reduce the size of the wall sign facing Warren Avenue to accommodate a new wall sign facing VNSF right-of-way. No matter what we do or this is voted on, and if it goes to the commission, there's still a violation. So, I mean, I don't want people to get caught up that we're trying to do something by making this motion and me seconding it that would allow this sign to be there. It's not. I mean, the current sign, the way it is in violation. just like those that decided to change their signs without coming before us or contacting us to talk about the ordinance itself. I just wanted to point that out. So, I mean, it's not like whatever we do here, he's saved by the bell because he doesn't have to do it. The sign is still out of compliance and will be depending on the outcome of the way it's being proposed.
Commissioner Barnett?
Thanks. I had something else, but to follow up on Sean's point, that's why the question about enforcement, Mayor. There's, the obvious driver for this is one particular situation, and as Jeff started out by saying, and Sean has just reiterated, we don't solve that, even if Plan Commission were to take up this proposal positively, and we were then subsequently later to take it up positively. It's still a couple of months down the road in between our budget and levy sessions, and it doesn't solve the answer. I would like to just sort of, for the record here, since we're doing that right now, voice my support for Commissioner Jose's idea, just thought process. Fair, is not equal. Those two are not interchangeable. And the process, I think, is pretty important. And we can certainly differ on whether we think this is a bypass of it or not. I think it is, others don't. But Commissioner Jose's points about the time that's gone on, the individuals involved, shoot, we don't even know what the logic was behind the current rules of concerning the BNSF right-of-way. We sit up here and say, well, geez, I don't see why it's any different. Somebody did. Some group of 7 people over the better part of a year and a half, plus our council and staff, did. And we don't know what that was. I certainly would entertain and gladly participate in any kind of attempt to start in with the sign ordinance and say, hey, all right, 10 years have gone by, what have we learned, what have we experienced, what problems do we see, and start in with it. There's no problem with that at all, but kind of one-off, on-the-fly changes, I'm challenged to find those as being good process. So that's where I'm at.
Commissioner Jose?
Thank you, Mayor. To Commissioner Durkin and Commissioner Olson's points, and also I guess it dovetails with some of what Commissioner Barnett just said. There are plenty of businesses out there that have had issues with the sign ordinance. I'm sure there are more folks out there that see it as a burden on their business, and as opposed to just the one that is affected here or the relative few in relation to the total number of businesses in Downers Grove that would be affected by this change, which is why I think we need to take that more comprehensive look in order to take into account all of the concerns of the business community, whether they're on the BNSF right-of-way, whether they're on the tollway, or whether it's just Ogden Avenue, 75th, 63rd, what have you. The process, it seems to me, and I think our experience bears this out, whether it's in terms of this or whether it's in terms of doing neighborhood traffic studies rather than changing stop signs here and there and pushing traffic problems to a different place in the neighborhood, or any number of other examples. That when we do things, taking a look at the whole chessboard, we end up with a better game than if we're only concerned about one piece or another.
I'm done. Just call a vote.
All right, well, we have a motion and a second. Well, I guess I should ask if there's any questions or comments from any members of the audience. You've been listening very patiently to this discussion. Hearing none, we have a motion and a second. Roll call, please.
Commissioner Olson?
Aye.
Commissioner Durkin?
Aye.
Commissioner Jose?
Nay.
Commissioner Rankin?
Nay.
Commissioner Barnett?
Nay.
Commissioner Neustadt?
Nay.
Mayor Tully?
Aye. Motion fails 4-3. All right, that's the easy one. Now we're going to go to some others. The next 2 items were initiated by Commissioner Barnett, so why don't we go with B, potential change of the structure of the stormwater utility. Commissioner, if you want to introduce that, since it was something that you first brought up in new business a few weeks ago.
Sure, thanks, Mayor. At the September 9th meeting, I brought this idea up, and I'm thankful for my colleagues for entertaining the discussion tonight and perhaps down the road over the next few weeks, because it certainly has the potential to impact 2015's planning. I'd like us to consider and move, I guess you were looking for motions the way we're doing this right now, so I'd move that the council restructure the stormwater utility to exempt property tax exempt parcels from paying stormwater fees.
Second.
Any discussion?
I'll start in. You know, we implemented, I was just looking this up, 2013, doesn't seem like that long ago, but we've got a lot of experience under our belts now. We've had what I would like to say a successful stormwater utility. We have begun a long-range plan of capital improvements as well as maintenance of the stormwater system by using the dedicated revenue source of the stormwater fee. In 2012-ish, I met with some of the folks out here in the audience to talk about the stormwater fee and its impacts on not-for-profits, churches, and other property tax exempt parcels. At that time, it was new. It was something that we had never done. Many communities, and I don't think any other communities in DuPage County have done it even to this day. And I was interested in having a fair and equal stormwater utility for the entire village. Now with much more experience and a lot of very professional and appropriate commentary from property tax exempt users, I feel that we can continue the stormwater utility without billing or with exempting those property tax exempt parcels. I know that it's a hit by about $218,000 to the stormwater utility. I'm not in favor of adding on to the stormwater utility ERU rate to make up for the $218,000. I think the proposed ERU rate for 2015 is appropriate. I think it's $9.72. But I think the important thing for me here is that the experience that we've had shows that stormwater utility works, it works well. It does create a burden for property tax exempt parcels. We've seen that, we've heard that now for a number of years. I will say with pretty significant hope that we can continue to use our energy to express the best management practices of stormwater runoff and stormwater control on these parcels. We have done a very good job of trying to educate people about stormwater runoff and how it affects the entire community. And I think if we can work with our staff and continue to work with all users to show that the best management practices for stormwater need to be followed and should be followed to the law, that's a very important part of this for me. So in response to Commissioner Barnett's and others' plea to exempt the property tax exempt parcels, I will be supporting that. I think it's important to know that we can at any time reinstate it. I know that's not a threat, but it is something that each year we have a budget process, as we've already heard, and it starts right now. It actually started last Friday when the budget came out. Was it last Friday or 2 Fridays ago?
2 Fridays.
So this stormwater utility fee will be always on the front burner. It's important to know that this council may just make a decision now, other councils may change that. This council right now can say no to the entire stormwater utility. I don't think that's the road we're going to go down. But for right now, tonight, with the experience we've had, I'm ready to make that change. And it is a definite change from my position before, there's no doubt. But I think it is the right thing to do. We've heard over and over again of all the community service that has been offered by all not-for-profits, all tax-exempt parcels. And I think that is something that we should take into very strong consideration, and I have. And I appreciate the appropriate and the kind commentary from not-for-profit users. We've sometimes get some pretty angry emails, but it seems like there's been a nice, consistent message. A couple times it got a little tricky, but I think overall we've had some good communication and dialogue back and forth. So thank you for that. That's all I have so far, Mayor. Thank you.
Thank you. Other, Commissioner Rozak?
Thank you, Mayor. This is an issue that I'm sympathetic to the faith community on, because I've not only am I a person of faith, but I've sat on the parish council of my parish, and I've seen the budgets, and I know how tight they can get. And I know that there are plenty of people out there who are hurting, despite the fact that the economy seems to be improving slowly but surely. All that said, I'm concerned about the reduction in the revenue. I'm concerned about what it says about whether we should classify the property based on the activity that takes place on it as opposed to the property itself and its characteristics in terms of whether it's got impervious space or permeable space. don't have a problem with helping out folks that are trying to do good works, but I'm not sure that we should necessarily be subsidizing them from the stormwater fund. I think we've got another proposal further down the agenda in terms of community grants that goes more in that direction. Commissioner Neustadt said at one point that it was a loss of $218,000, except the council responses tonight shows that it's not. It's actually a loss of about $10 million because we're losing bonding authority in the amount of $5 million in 2017 and the amount of $5 million in 2022. And that results in the loss of 6 different projects, which if I've got the budget right here means Benton and Elmwood between Maple and Randall floodplain improvements are not going to be completed. Deer Creek subdivision floodplain improvements would not be completed. St. Joe's Creek north of Railroad floodplain improvements would not be completed. South of Prairie between Forest and Prince local drainage improvements would not be completed. Chase Avenue between Haddo and Warren local drainage improvements would not be completed. And the Hobson Triangle area would not have the local drainage improvements there either. So it's more than just saying we want to help these folks that are doing good works. Of course we do, but is this the right way to do it? I'm not entirely sure it is. That said, I would be open to an idea, much like Commissioner Reinken had floated probably about a year ago this time, that had to do with freezing the fee, or perhaps increasing it only every certain number of years on the tax-exempt parcels. But I think we have to look at the fact that a lot of these tax-exempt parcels are big users of the stormwater system. They're large buildings, a lot of parking lots, creates a lot of stormwater runoff. And regardless of whether it's St. Joseph's, where I happen to attend church, or the massive concrete that is at 75th and Lamont, and obviously there are different activities going on there, but they both contribute to a large extent to the stormwater needs in those areas. And I think we have to some extent, divorce the use that takes place on parcel from the fact that it is a large contributor to the stormwater issues. So I don't want to see necessarily whether it's a secular not-for-profit or a faith-based not-for-profit facing the brunt of these stormwater fees. But I think we have to, at some level, recognize the fact that they are also users of the system. And it's not a matter of double paying, because what we end up with, if you take the logic that was presented by a speaker earlier and flip it on its head, what ends up happening is rather than the users of the different tax-exempt parcels paying, you get all of us paying because we need to increase the fee in this case, this year, it's over 80 or 90%. It's almost doubling the increase of the fee this year to maintain the same amount of revenue. Or we end up with folks in the neighborhoods that I just described a minute ago continuing to suffer flooding when they otherwise wouldn't. And I think there are probably some congregants from the different churches who signed this letter earlier. I think the pastor said there were 17 of them live in those neighborhoods and would suffer that flooding. So it's a complex issue, but I would rather see us go down a road that keeps us moving toward addressing the stormwater problems that for too long were not addressed, rather than dialing back and leaving a whole lot of folks dealing with flooding when maybe they otherwise shouldn't. Thanks.
Thank you. Commissioner Rankin?
Thank you, Mayor. I would support this if it indeed reduced this year's proposed spending on stormwater projects by the amount that would be changed instead of asking our other payers to cover that. We've heard many, many times from the tax-exempt parcels, particularly the churches, and how this has impacted them and what effect it's having on their organizations. We've heard countless stories. As Commissioner Jose had mentioned, I had previously proposed a reduced rate for these groups. I didn't get support for that. you know, you look at the list of users, and this is not the list I'm looking for, but one of the things we talk about a lot is community value. And there's churches on the list, but there's also, you know, the school districts and the sanitary districts. So as the churches explained tonight, that they would ask the people that attend their church to give more to help pay for this. I would assume that the school district and the sanitary district are just taxing the property taxpayers more to cover this fee. So I just think that it's a minor reduction, and I think it's fair, and I think it's consistent with what we keep hearing from these people and how it's impacting their organization. I don't think that's our intent at all. So I would support Commissioner Barnett's proposal.
Commissioner Olson.
Thanks to everybody for the feedback, and I want to thank that members of the faith community and not-for-profit community for spending so much time advocating on this issue. I think that is exactly what they should be doing, and I think that we've heard a lot of feedback, and I appreciate hearing about it. And it's one of the reasons that my position on stormwater utility in general has evolved. I personally have, stormwater utility has been something that has been an interesting concept, and I think we've had some experience with it. But for me personally, I really believe that we should think of two choices. To me, this comes down to, do we want a utility or do we want the tax-based system, the previous system? And do we want a utility which is about everybody paying in for services that everybody uses, or do we want the previous system, with tax-based system, where it's treated more as an infrastructure need, that the tax-paying properties fund? And as I look at this more and more, I think that this proposal that blends these two models is not a good one. I'm not in favor of this proposal. I'm also not in favor of, not generally in favor of the stormwater utility. I think the idea of moving back to a property tax-based system is appealing to me. I think that if this is the direction we wish to go, I think that it is worth discussing whether we still would like to continue to have a utility. Because from my perspective, I think the result that we had in the previous system, where these entities were not paying, but receiving services because they create runoff, that it has to be addressed by the village. I think that system worked. I think we obviously needed to fund it and to identify funding sources, but I think that model, hearing a lot of some consensus, or at least initially a number of people saying that we should go away from the model of taxing, of charging tax-exempt parcels. I think that it may be a time for moving back to a model where we get away from rain taxes, as some call it, or stormwater utilities, and more to a model where it's part of the general tax levy. And I think that this would be an appropriate move, especially given the thoughts we've heard tonight. So, like Commissioner Neustadt, my position has evolved to some extent. I think the stormwater utility idea is an admirable experiment. I think it has worked to fund projects. Obviously, we've had additional projects. But I personally believe that given some of the feedback we've heard from the community, both the not-for-profit community, the residents and businesses, I think that a move back to the previous system would benefit the entire community more than this specific proposal. So therefore, I'm not going to support this proposal, but I would be open to future changes to perhaps move to a property tax-based system. With that, thank you, Mayor.
I guess I'm the last guy. Is that true? I have a question, and it's not off these notes of mine, but to staff. Based on what Commissioner Olson just stated, if we go back to the way it was, who or how much larger would this attached list be that we would be, I mean, because if you go to the page, I think it's page 3 of the staff, we have the Excel spreadsheet that lists everybody that we are going to be taking out that make up the $218,000 loss in revenue. How much larger would this list be if we reverted back to the property tax?
Same list. What would happen is, if property tax exempts are taken out of the utility, that they would no longer pay into the system. It's the same list of people who wouldn't pay if it was a property tax-based system. Same list. However, the other thing is the shift among the land uses that occurred when we went from a property tax base to utility. Remember that the property tax base was more heavily focused on residential properties, and it shifted somewhat to the business community. This would shift it back. So we'd have to revisit, if we were to entertain returning to the property tax-based systems, not only the payers, but the amounts they pay based on their ad valorem value of their properties.
Okay. All along, I have said that I supported removing the places of worship out of the stormwater utility fee. It was purely an oversight on my part. Back in 2013, not many politicians will admit to making an error, but I have just done so. It was something that I should have thought about when this was all coming before us, and remembered the fact that when I was one of the votes that cut the social services from our budget, our operations as a village, to go into court, police, fire, public works. This was purely an oversight because it was the places of worship that came before us and said, we'll take on those social services. And I have to say, I wish there was more of this discussion prior to the vote that we made on the stormwater utility fee. Is there any way that this waiver really only be for places of worship that are federally taxed or federally recognized as places of worship? Because this really reverts back to what Commissioner Olson is saying, is go back to the old way of school, and then you get back your tax break, property tax break. So, I know I made the second, and I'm sure I'm the tie vote here, the teeter-totter here, but I'm hesitant to do something without more discussion from staff to tell us what, you know what I mean? I think we're getting into a major gray area.
I'm going to pick up on your comments in a minute.
Okay, because I do support removing the places of worship. That's a given. That's a fact. But I'm not 120% sold on removing everyone from this, because this is greater than what I anticipated.
The answer to the question is, can you pick and choose among the list by category? The answer is yes, you can. However, if that happens, it would put the village in a position of making a decision of whether or not somebody qualifies under the program. It's much cleaner, more predictable to go with a system of whether you're tax exempt or not. That's a decision that's made outside of the village. Any carving up within this list puts us in a position of decision-making based on other factors, which is more difficult to administer in a predictable manner.
And Sean, I mean, there's Little Friends on there. They're not a church, but would you want to be making a decision saying that you think Little Friends?
Well, there's a lot of them. There's Midwestern University. There's the Village of Downers Grove at $40,000. I mean, Downers Grove Township. I mean, my intention, when this first came, or we started talking about it, was to remove the places of worship who came before us and said, we collectively, and I sit on the finance committee for the parish for St. Mary's, I'll disclose that. So I know the impacts that are here. I know what cuts are being done. I know how much more we have to ask the parishioner for more money. I understand it. I'm doing the same thing here, but in a reverse role, I just raise your taxes for more. But the fact is, I did not envision this list the way it is when I said that I would support removing the places of worship.
Mayor?
Sure.
I don't want to cut anybody off.
No, I mean, I think this is discussion that needs to be had.
Well,
And I'm not
actually-
the center chair, nor do I
actually,
want to be,
if-
but
if-
I think this needs to be talked about.
If I can indulge you, ask you to indulge me for a second, Commissioner. I
Yeah,
just want
go
to pick
ahead.
up on something that Commissioner Durkin just said, because I have a very similar concern. First, I'm a little surprised by some of the change of heart that I'm hearing, because the narrative has been the same since even before the storm utility was implemented. The impact upon places of worship doesn't come as any surprise to anybody. I understand that you're saying that that wasn't fully something appreciated by you, but that was something that was discussed before it was implemented. It's been discussed by our guests who've been here tonight on numerous occasions. Pastor Overly's been here before. The things that are in this letter, this has been the same narrative for about a year and a half now. So I'm a little surprised by the change of heart, particularly the timing of it. But let's just focus on who we've been hearing from. Commissioner Durkin points out the list that's in front of us, that is the list of tax-exempt parcels in the community. And it includes a lot of people, Tollway Authority, the post office, and a lot of places have nothing to do with worship and nothing to do with some of the things we've been hearing from our guests here tonight in terms of pleas about the impact upon them. And the revenue impact is significant. We're talking about $200,000 today, but over the life of the utility, it can be as much as several $1 million. So let's just put it in the right context. We're not talking about small change here. We're talking about a major impact. And I don't agree with turning it on one year and turning it off another year. We just had, a 20-minute conversation about the impact of the sign ordinance. This would be colossally worse to do something like that. But let's go back to what we've been hearing. Of the list, we've been hearing, I think our numbers line up, from about 22 parcels. Not everyone on this list, 22 parcels. And if you add up those 22 parcels, and I'm just looking at the annual net impact for, I think it's this year, it's on this list, we're talking about 2014, about $37,000. I understand $37,000 is a big deal to the places of worship who do have value in this community, and to suggest that they don't, no one's ever said that and no one's ever felt that. That I can commit to you. Some of the places on the list, it's a significant impact. I know that we're all aware that St. Mary's, it's about a $10,000 impact. That's a big impact. Others not so much, some down to a couple $100, $1,000. Every dollar counts, we understand that. But my concern is that this is sort of a sledgehammer approach to something that maybe needs a needle or a scalpel. And I hear where the council is going, and if we want to do something like this, so be it. But to exempt so much of this that essentially scuttles the entire program, eliminates our ability to finish projects that are in the works that people have been waiting for, counting on, to reduce our ability to bond. I mean, we've done entire programs and made representation to the community about stormwater projects that are going to get finished in the near term. And I'm also a little surprised about this, because it wasn't too long ago that we had a meeting where there was some critical comments made about us not getting enough done soon enough. And if this would have the impact of actually reducing our ability to get things done substantially, I'm very concerned about that. So I have those concerns, and I also have concerns about what it is that's being exempted. So to pick up on Commissioner Durkin's point, two things. One, I think we need to have a conversation about what's being exempted, because if we're exempting $37,000 a year, which over the life of the utility is maybe a couple $100,000, okay. Maybe we don't not get projects done. Maybe we don't lose our ability to bond for important things. Maybe we don't renege on our promise to the community to get stormwater projects done. And I would implore my colleagues to really think about that and see if we can, if this is the direction we're going, fine. I'm happy to have that conversation. I'm happy to explore it. We've always said we would. But let's do it in a more surgical way that addresses the need that we've been hearing about for the last 2 years, and not completely undermine the promise that we've made to this community to be serious about addressing stormwater issues. That's point number one. Point number two, also picking up on Commissioner Durkin's comment, this is not something that we should be doing here tonight, kind of on a one-time basis, where this proposal, I mean, yes, Commissioner Barnett's plea has been made many, many times. He brought it up a few weeks ago, but tonight is the first time that we got the documentation about what the impact was.
No, it's not, Mayor. We've known that exact number for the last 3 years.
Not on the bonding capacity. And if
When
I'm
you're
finished-
finished, I'd like to speak to my motion if you
Oh, you
are
absolutely
in for
can.
indulgences still.
So my only point is twofold. If this is the direction we're going, fine, I'll support it. But I think we should do it on a more tailored basis. And if we're really worried about the impact upon places of worship in our community, it may be an additional burden upon our staff to try to figure out who is and who isn't. But I hate to tell you this, guys, but people do that. We can do that. I'm very concerned about undermining our promise to the community by doing more than we need to. I agree with Commissioner Durkin on this 100%. The other thing is to make that kind of an impact. And whether you agree with me or not, let's set that aside. To have an impact upon excising someone from the program where I don't think the community at large is aware, and it's on the website, you talked about it 3 weeks ago, I get it, but the community at large, let's face it, is not aware of what it is we're talking about doing tonight. We had 2 years of discussion about the implementation of the stormwater utility. And to make what could be, we can disagree about whether it's a big impact or a small impact, a change like this in one night's discussion, I don't think is fair to the community. I think we got to have more discussion about it. And if the community agrees that this is something we got to do, or they agree that we should exempt all tax-exempt parcels, and understanding what the impact of that is, and no one here can convince me that the community at large really understands that, because we haven't discussed it, but actually doing it tonight, because we now have a different, we've had some changes of heart. I think we owe it to the community to have that conversation so that they understand it. Heck, we may even want to hear from the community. This may be something that might be appropriate for a non-binding referendum. If the community really wants to do something like that, then let's hear from the community. I would implore my colleagues, number one, to be more surgical in their approach, and number two, to really bring in the rest of the community so that the rest of the community understands what it is that we're doing here tonight, such that we're not in a budget discussion 3 months from now, and suddenly we're faced with people like, you did what? That is my concern. But if this is the direction we're going, I'm along for the ride.
No, that's all I have.
Mayor, would it be appropriate to bring this into the budget discussion on Saturday? I mean, we are having a budget meeting on Saturday.
I'm just really afraid that the community at large is not at all aware or apprised of what we're talking about here tonight and what the impact could be, and whether it's 1 or the impact is 10. We can disagree about that, but there's no question there's an impact. And I think we owe it to the community based on prior representations about what our program was, what our policies were, that to actually effectuate the change tonight would be a huge disservice to the community. If we're going to make the change, fine. I'd like to hear more from the public, and I'm not generally a fan of referendums, but this is something where we really want to hear about the community. If the community values something so much that they're willing to take on that exclusion and understanding what the impacts potentially are in terms of our ability to do stormwater projects and bonding, I think we need to hear from the community.
Mayor, if I could, there is a motion on the table. If the motion were voted in the affirmative tonight, staff would take that as direction to do 3 things. Number 1, change the FY15 budget information in the manner that Commissioner Olson just referenced, where we would show the impacts on the FY15 budget. Number 2, change the multi-year stormwater utility revenue and expense plan, the plan that drives the budgets, to understand the short-term and long-term implications on both the revenue and expense side, including the allocation of maintenance versus capital expenses, which would have to be relooked at. And third, prepare an ordinance for council consideration at a later date, changing the structure of the stormwater utility. So those were the 3 things that that's how we would take a yes.
Well, and I appreciate that clarification, because just the way it's sort of set up, I was concerned that action is being taken tonight. If what we're talking about is what Manager Fielman just described, which is that would be direction to staff to prepare those materials for discussion at future meetings, and I think we have an opportunity to engage the rest of the community, or at least hear if they have a viewpoint on it. If they don't, so be it. But I think we owe it to the community, based on the representations of the last 2 years, to engage them fully in the conversation.
Mayor, I think it's important also that we kind of fully understand exactly what we've got here before we even take this vote tonight, provided we do take a vote, because I think what Commissioner Barnett's initial proposal is fundamentally different from what Commissioner Durkin has been describing. And I think there's a tension between the two that I'm not sure we can resolve at the moment. If we're exempting only faith-based or parcels owned by faith-based organizations, that puts us in a very odd position of trying to determine what is and is not faith-based, and I'm not sure that I'm comfortable with that, and I'm not sure that anybody else up here is.
It's been done.
It kind of runs the gamut from everything from, God, I never thought I'd say this at a council meeting, but everything from your typical church to the Church of the Flying Spaghetti Monster. There's any number of different directions that this could go. So I would encourage us to at least take the next few days, as Commissioner Olson suggested, to have a longer discussion at the budget meeting that's coming up on Saturday, so that we can try to really digest the comments that have been made tonight, whether it's from the public or that we're up here on the dais, and perhaps postpone this at least those few days.
We still haven't heard from Bob.
Yes, Commissioner Barnett?
Just waiting patiently. Couple of things. There's a whole lot here. You know, what there are maybe is a few too many surgeon wannabe lawyers. Is entirely possible. That and finance majors. We took right out of the bat and dropped 30% of this revenue from day one because the schools and the parks got hinky about it. So we could take that $118,000 and we could make sure that we fully make sure all the public understands the millions of dollars of bonding impact that has over the life of a utility, which is what exactly? Anyone? Jump in, tell me what the life of the utility is?
I know what we projected for it.
What was that?
The life is, it continues in perpetuity.
Right,
until we do something.
exactly. So the $117,000 a year, you can make one hell of a math model out of that if you'd like to. And you could run down the list and explain to everybody how we've shorted them because the schools got a little sideways when we first broached the idea in 2012. The fact of the matter is in 2007, we did a study and we picked up $50, $80 million worth of projects that were necessary throughout the village to rectify our stormwater conditions. We then bonded for it. We then spent $20 million over what we thought was 3 years, turned into 5. And guess what? It wasn't the same list of projects. No shit. Because you know what? That's what happens.
Sorry, I didn't hear you, Commissioner.
Sorry, my day in and day out job of project management and engineering and construction is getting in the way of the attorneys in the room that seem to think that a 5-year or 7-year or 15-year budget for capital expenditures on stuff like stormwater is somehow more science than theory. It's not. We saw a couple of things happen. We saw budgets change, we saw the environment for bidding change, we saw the effects of projects be greater in some instances and smaller than in others. We saw 2013 a radical flood which changed our direction entirely, not entirely, but substantially. Anybody that sits here right now and says to the people at Hobson Triangle that there is no chance we're going to do your stormwater remediation but for this $216,000 is absolutely full of it. There's just no way around it. That is just not what our experience and our evidence has shown over the last 7 years, and any reasonable person who understands the idea of doing massive civil projects of community-wide over a decade of time would recognize. That's pure hyperbole. We talk about what...
Just for the record, the staff answered the question.
I-
It's not
it-
some
because
certain
you make it up.
lawyers that made it up, Commissioner. with all due
Because when
respect.
you ask a question, it's got to get answered, Mayor. The answer is not going to be sufficient to say, well, you know what, we really don't know. But we do know from our long-range planning that we've been doing since '07 that those 3-year and 5-year plans are slightly more accurate than the 10 and 15-year plans. You just said the life of this utility is forever. The picked end point of 15 years or 10 years or whatever to come up with an equation for what might that money be worth today is, again, just another random number. Why didn't we pick 100 years? What's the value of the $218,000 over 100 years? Which brings me to my point about the value. What this does fundamentally, Commissioner Durkin, is it restores the basic premise that has existed beyond Downers Grove forever in the United States. That is, certain entities and their activities are recognized by the government for the value they provide, some of which, but for that service, would have to be assumed by government, some of which is not defined. And we say, therefore, that those certain activities are exempt from taxation. They're exempt from sales tax. They're exempt from a ton of things.
Post office?
They are exempt from a ton of things. And it's not just stormwater taxes in Downers Grove. When the church buys a bulk of paper, they don't pay Downers Grove sales tax on it. Our little 1% add-on that we've added on stuff for fuel, they pay no taxes on most things because that value to the community is recognized. That value is not measured in bonding authority 5 years out. It's a philosophical, fundamental belief about our interaction as government with the agencies in our community, faith-based or otherwise, that provide an enormous amount of value to our community. We've chosen one, and Commissioner Olson finally is sort of stepping up here with the idea of property tax. We've chosen one issue with which this body had a great need. Our community had a great need, and tried to figure out how to fund it. And the most entertaining thing to fund it with is a way that allows us to sit here and tell people we're not raising their taxes. We did it in '05, '06, and '07 with utility taxes. That's borne out in every graph we've got that we've tried to look at in the retrospect to try and understand our finances. This is a very real cost, and it is a very real tax on every resident in Downers Grove. And if we're going to put a tax on them, we ought to stay consistent with the philosophy that says these organizations provide real value for which we're respected. And all these conversations about they need to pay their share, they're heavy impervious areas. Yeah, no kidding. But we're not making them pay their fair share on any other thing that we've got. We've got a $44 million operating budget to which we're making them pay their fair share zero, but for this item. It's a very reasonable and fair fear that the faith-based community would have that says, what are you going to do when all of a sudden your street plan doesn't work? And 10 years from now, you didn't make as much progress as you'd hoped, and you got to find a new revenue source, and you don't want to go to the ballot box saying, please let me, I just raised your taxes. That's a totally realistic fear based on this. We are changing the way we interact with our tax-exempt community, which is not just faith-based, Sean. It's not even close to faith-based. Martin, I can't talk about the total authority. You know as well as I do, there's a lot of goofy relationships between state and local and municipal governments. By and large, this is a list of people whom provide services to our community that warrant their being free from taxation. That's what it is. I appreciate that. I do sincerely, but this is not generally the way we try and operate. We can dice this up surgically, and then we're going to have a tough time getting consensus that we ought to start picking winners and losers. We can dice it up by entity, same thing. The same thing, we're getting ready in, I don't know, 5 minutes or 15, whatever it is, to talk about our community grants. And it's going to be the same kind of discussion that we had 4 or 5 years ago. Well, how do we start deciding who should get a few dollars and who shouldn't? We can make that same thing here. I think it'd be a huge mistake. The fact is that $218,000 is a ton of real money. There is no doubt about it. It is a ton of real money. It's a ton of real money to all these organizations. It's to our schools, it's to our universities, it's to our churches, it's to family shelter services and everybody else who's providing value to our community. I really kind of take, I guess I shouldn't take so much offense, but the idea that this is now somehow a math equation about engineering projects 10 years out. Somebody should respond to me with why we think that's okay with the schools. They're providing millions of dollars over the infinite life of the utility for educational purposes. Baloney. That's just not true. So I'm disappointed, certainly, in some of what I'm hearing. Some of it is encouraging. But I think we're getting kind of over our own personal skis when we start talking about the wanting to dice this up surgically, pick winners and losers, and deal with what the amount of the money 10 years or 15 years or 100 years out is. It's huge money today to us, and it's huge money today to the not-for-profits. That is exactly the issue. It is huge money to them, all of them. So obviously I made the motion. I'm certainly hoping that it moves forward as far as what to do tonight versus what to do on Saturday versus what to do come levy passage time. As Manager Fieldman said, we can pass this tonight and not make a single change. But it prepares staff for the idea that we would remove these NFPs. I would still encourage my colleagues to do that tonight. It's preparation for those conversations on Saturday, and it continues the conversation forward in a way that is frankly a little more than avoiding it, which is kind of what I think we're doing. I think everybody's nervous about it, and they should be because it's a big decision. But to suggest that people don't know, I mean, Greg, you telling me you don't know what the people at your church think about it? Martin, are you telling me you don't know what the people at
I've heard
Family
from people
Shelter
on both
Services
sides of
think?
it.
Where are the people from the other side? There's a lot of people in the audience who've clapped here tonight, but the problem is the rest of the people are not here tonight. If we got a notice about this very issue, I guarantee you there'd be people who would disagree to be in those seats. There are
Right.
some people here tonight who are in those seats that disagree.
Which is why I don't think we should.
That's my point. It's not about slicing and dicing, Commissioner, and your passion and your emotion is obvious, and I respect that. It's an emotional topic for you. It comes out, and that passion's important. But let's just go back to what I'm hearing. I heard at least 5 people say they want to go forward. I'm not quite sure what you're fighting about.
I'm fighting about the characterization that there is some sort of, if we are going to talk about this thing, I think it's important that we avoid talking about 5, 10, and 15-year engineering predictions about what the cost of this might be.
I think
Because you can't say that.
I think that's blowing it way too much.
Because
All I'm suggesting is that to the extent there's any impact, and I'll take your example, Commissioner. When we talk about changing the projected increases from 8% to 3%, we have a couple meetings and we talk about with the community what that means. When bids come in under less and we have more money or we do more projects or the bonds come back, we have a discussion. All I'm saying is that I think we owe it to the community to have a conversation about that beyond tonight. And if what the manager said was passing this motion tonight, which I think I said I'm on board, if we pass this motion tonight, and that means that it comes up in the process so the community can understand it's part of the budget process, that Commissioner Durkin implored people to participate in, which we all implore people to participate in, fine, that's all I'm suggesting. I do have a disagreement about, I don't think it's picking winners and losers. I'm looking at a list. It's the same list from last year, and it's the same list from the year before that, and the year before that.
And 12.
It's 22 parcels.
Yeah.
It's
It's the same
really
list
easy
from
to pick who they are.
2012. Mayor, I apologize if I am getting a little agitated about this. I am. I fully admit that. If it's somehow out of inappropriate, I certainly apologize for that. I'm not going to apologize for having a ton of emotion about it. The issue for me is that, and you brought it up briefly when you talked about the percentages. I had similar comments, you might recall, at Fire Station 2, when we sat there, the 7 of us, and run our hands back and forth about whether this increase ought to be 8.3, 8.7, 6.4. All due respect, colleagues, we don't know that. Can we ask staff to create a math model? Sure, it's a math model. We can ask the kids at North to create a math model. The fact is that 8.3 or 8.4 or 6.4 or 6.2 is a ridiculous conversation. This is a policy discussion about how we want to interact with our not-for-profits. That's what it should be.
Well, it's more than that. It's also, to the extent it has any impact, and we can argue about it whether it's a small impact, a big impact, a tomorrow impact, a 10-year impact, I think that we also need to be able to answer the question to the resident out there who believes that the project's going to get done in a certain period of time, or who has not been told anything about a project, but has a certain expectation given our focus on stormwater maintenance and infrastructure, that when that resident comes to us and says, okay, Mr. Mayor, when am I getting my project done? Then I don't just shrug my shoulders and say, you know what, I can't tell you. Don't know because it's like counting snowflakes, I don't know. I don't think that's fair. I think we need to be able to give some kind of expectation, some kind of reasonable estimate, understanding there are many variables. I get that.
We do that every year with streets.
We do that every
People call us up and say, you said my street was next year, how come it's not on the list?
But we do put out a list.
Because we change them.
We do put out a list, and we hear from people
And
when
they're
they
very
show up.
and they're very fluid.
I agree with you. I don't disagree with you. There's more agreement going on here than I think you even recognize. All I'm suggesting
Doesn't
is
feel like
that...
it. You're right, I don't recognize it. Thank you, because it doesn't feel like it.
And thank you for recognizing I was right last time. See, we're really getting a lot.
Mayor, a lot accomplished
All
tonight.
I'm saying is that I think that a narrower solution would be a better one, because it, by definition, will have less impact. And I think that any impact is something that we owe the community an understanding. And if that's going to happen as part of the process that was described, I'm fine with that.
I don't want to shut anybody off, so I'll zip it up. I would certainly like to move this motion forward tonight if everybody's up for it or not. I'd like to call that vote at some point, Mayor. You do that when you see
Yes,
fit.
the only thing I was getting at is Commissioner Durkin, as the person who seconded the motion, raised a legitimate question. I don't know if his concern has been answered. There sounds to me, and if everyone is of the same understanding that there's a process that's going to be followed here because of the village manager, then I have no problem. Because there will be opportunities for more public intervention, and with all due respect to everyone's here tonight, there are other people who have an interest in this topic who are not here tonight. I think that would be fair to say. I don't think anybody can disagree with that. And I think we just owe it to them to be equally fair as we've lent our ears to those here tonight, we lend our ears to those who are not here tonight. Commissioner.
Thank you, Mayor. I may be just a surgeon wannabe lawyer, but I also know how to, read a budget, and I think we've gotten pretty good at budgeting. And we've got engineers, not too unlike yourself, Bob, telling us approximately what these projects cost. And we do have community expectations. And when they tell us that, removing this $218,000, it's not just $218,000 one year. It's year after year after year, and it would go up with whatever the increase is in the stormwater utility fee. When they're telling us that that's cutting our bonding authority in half, I think we have to take that seriously. And we're not talking about in perpetuity, we're talking about over the next 8 years. It's not, it's a matter of, we have a plan, we've all said that we're interested in getting these stormwater projects done because it's a problem in the community has said they want it solved, and each one of us has said we want it done. And we've come from an era when a lot of infrastructure needs, whether it's stormwater or otherwise, the problems were kicked down the road. And I think if we stray too far from the plan too quickly, we end up, in effect, kicking the can further down the road. It may not be the intent, but that's what ends up happening. And that's what I'd like to avoid. We don't know what's going to happen in 2022 or 2024. What we do know is that we have problems now. So let's fix what we can now, and if we end up reaping the benefits of being able to change the plan later, let's reap those benefits then, but let's not assume that our plan is flawed simply because it happens to be long.
Plan's not flawed. The plan itself of trying to do the work is not flawed, and if there's been a larger advocate up here, consistent advocate up here for actually getting serious about fixing stormwater infrastructure than myself, I'd jump out and explain.
Might take you up on that.
Well, within the last 3 years, Mayor,
Thank you.
I can't deal with your time before. But the issue, Greg, is that is one of timing. It's all one of timing, because we could also, we know that in 2015 with this NFP, or I'm sorry, with the tax exempt parcels in the plan with $218,000, we're still not going to do approximately $2 million worth of stuff that we really think we probably should. And what that is a value judgment by this group, not an engineering judgment. We know right now what rate we should be running the stormwater utility on the water bills right now to do the bonding we want to do and do the maintenance we think we should do.
And if
it's a million miles from what we're doing.
And but the value judgment is more than just we shouldn't hit the NFPs or tax exempt parcels with this fee. It's also saying that I don't want to then raise the fee in order to get the same amount of stuff done. You're making a value judgment too by saying I'm going to defer doing these projects.
Absolutely,
because I don't have
absolutely.
this
There's no
revenue.
argument. But what that does is it takes a little bit away from the math. That's what I'm getting at. It's a value judgment by this body about how much work we want to do next year and 5 years out.
I don't often quote other politicians, but I think it was Vice President Biden who said, show me your budget and I'll show you your values. And I think if we truly value getting our infrastructure done, we need to pay attention to the budget.
Well, and this goes back to why this should be a community conversation, because if we're talking about value propositions.
Talking about Joe.
We need to hear what the community values. And this may require more than just some meetings down the road. This may require a broader canvassing of the community.
In the interest of moving on, I'll consider myself done, Mayor.
Other comments, questions? All right, well, I know what my understanding is based on the motion, based on staff. So I'll call the roll.
Commissioner Barnett?
Oh, hold on a second, I'm sorry.
Public input.
Thank you. Sorry. Before we call the roll, questions or comments from the audience?
Hi, this is Jerry Filio again from 1454 Arrowwood Lane. I question that the $218,000 loss. With our church Glory Day, we're paying the full stormwater fee when we have a stormwater pond. To get rid of the stormwater fee, we have to get a $2,500 as-built survey of the property to prove that, yes, indeed, we have the pond that's installed correctly. Just alone, the restrictor valve, the restrictor manhole is $10,000. That's just for that. That's not including any of the earthwork. We had a big addition on 2007. We put a new parking lot, a big addition on, and we have the full stormwater pond. I encourage anybody, when it rains, to drive around the village and look at ponds that work and ponds that don't work. You'd be surprised how many ponds don't work. Our pond works. It's all the way full to the top. I won't go on to what happened to our village and stormwater in about 10, 11 years ago. You guys can ask around, you'll find out. But that's probably what's happening to the sins as to why a lot of these stormwater ponds aren't working on private property. So if you back off on some of these fees of properties that do have stormwater, you mentioned quite a few nonprofits, some of the big ones. Are they looking at getting a reduction in the stormwater fee because many of them have large ponds? Are they for the full impervious pavement? I'm not sure, but they do have large ponds, and I don't know if everybody should be paying these large fees that have ponds. Thank you.
Yeah, actually, a number of them do receive credits for providing some stormwater treatment on site.
Because we're paying a lot of money, and we have a large pond. Thank you.
Thank you.
Hi, I'm Joe Potts, 216 Lincoln, and I'm very much in favor of staying the course at this time. The stormwater utility is fairly new, and there are some growing pains, but I believe that if you're part of the problem, you should be part of the solution. And I understand not-for-profits having to tighten their belt, but even residents had to tighten their belt. There's a misconception that our property taxes were decreased in order for us to have a stormwater utility on our water bill, but it's not an even Steven. I had a slightly smaller reduction on my income tax, but my real estate tax, but I have to tighten my belt to pay the stormwater portion of my water bill. So there's a misconception that a resident got a trade-off, and that's not true. Most neighbors I talk to are paying more than they would if it was back on the tax rolls. And I believe that nonprofits can find ways to pay for it. I had to reduce my expenses. One less Happy Meal for my grandson, that's $3 a week. For a month, that's like, $12 saved. You could just buy the prize for $1.09. So you can save money that way. And also, how to figure out which nonprofits would be taken off. Churches or faith-based nonprofits, they're not always bare bones organizations. There are ways, if every member of the church got one less pizza a month, that would help pay their stormwater fees. If your church is having a golf outing and it's a $30, fee for green fees and prizes, skip the prizes. Give that extra $15 to your church to pay the stormwater fee. There are ways to do it. And like I said, it's kind of a new, we're only about a year into this, so I would say give it more time. We're coming out of a recession. Everybody's feeling the budget crunches, and things are getting a little better, but not for everybody. So I would say, continue the discussions, but don't do anything right now. Just, let it sink in, let people understand what's really happening, and get all the facts out. Thank you.
Thank you. Other questions or comments? And the motions on the table is to exempt all tax-exempt parties, exclude all tax-exempt parcels from the utility.
That's the motion. Staff would prepare information with both options going forward.
Including a lesser exclusion that was faith-based tax-exempt property.
Only because I anticipate that question, so yes, we'll go ahead and run that as well.
Thank you.
Good evening. My name is Jim Crawford, 201 56th Street. First, thanks for doing this. I know it's been an 18-month conversation, there's been a lot of debate. This is kind of why I like small government, right? Access, honest debate, looking each other in the eye and debating the issue. So I appreciate it. You've been listening, you've been participating. I greatly appreciate it. I know we've thrown out a lot of ideas to try different ways to get at it, and I definitely appreciate that participation. I get why you want to protect the integrity of the utility. I actually do prefer the utility in the sense of applying it back to usage. I miss the property tax deduction, and I miss the protections of the state law, capping property taxes, capping the ability to spend money, the accountability that goes with that. But I just want to go over a couple of points, and I know you guys have heard from me many times, and you know probably all can recite many of the things that I believe, but I just got to tell you, I choose to participate to worship. I choose then to participate and give cash. I'm paying at home. Everybody in Downers Grove should share the cost equally. You should not make me pay more money because I choose to worship. To me, it's that simple. You talk about fairness, you talk about sharing, and you talk about the ability of all of us participating in it. We make choices, and I get it. There are many people here who don't believe that the churches should be exempt because they're looking at tight budgets themselves, and I understand those costs. But you don't want to be a government entity that creates a negative incentive to participate in a place of worship. Why would you place a greater burden on a United States citizen to participate in worship and make them carry a larger cost to government than they're already doing at home? I don't get that. And then I'm going to stick with my last original argument that we kind of discussed before. The Illinois Appellate Court in Rock Island versus the Church of Peace erred. They came up with a 3-step criteria on use. It's a 5-step criteria recognized by the Missouri Supreme Court. This will be litigated in Illinois. This will be heard again. You cannot show specific use across a broad application of participation throughout the community. This is a tax. You can choose to call it a fee and operate it and make the exemptions you want to exempt because you control the rules of the utility. And you can choose to operate that utility any way you want to do. I strongly recommend that you read out the ordinance. Jacksonville, Florida is already recognizing religious nonprofits only. The federal government gives a very clear, distinct definition of religious nonprofits. So that groundwork is already there. So for me, it's simple. It's simple. As a government entity, I truly believe do not want to create a negative incentive for participating in worship. Number 2, I believe we're flawed in the Illinois Appellate Court back against the Church of Peace in Rock Island and eventually will be overturned and or re-litigated. And finally, you got a chance to lead. DuPage County's looking at it. Naperville's looking at it. Westmont's looking at it. Other communities are going to debate it. Downers Grove has a chance to say, hey, we are going to exempt religious nonprofits or even all nonprofits because it's the right thing to do. As we become a more secular nation, it becomes harder to protect the religious freedoms that are guaranteed by the Constitution. But that's why the protections are there. Whether you believe a church should exist or not, or whether you believe religion's important or not, or whether you believe participating in them or not, the fact of the matter, there is a separational issue. And just because you're creating utility to apply the fee back to the people does not, in my mind, allow you to get around that issue. You cannot show specific use. That puts the utility at risk, I believe. Thanks.
Thanks again. Good to see you.
Thanks.
Good evening, Mr. Waldeck.
Good evening, Mayor and Council and staff. William Waldeck, 1409 Willard Place for the record, in Downers. Boy, your conversation, I had prepared remarks and you guys just kind of, because there's a lot of surprises tonight, and I'm glad for the conversation. I find myself, oddly enough, agreeing with Commissioner Barnett quite a bit tonight. As a matter of fact, we agreed together because I've been opposed to the stormwater utility a lot longer than Commissioner Barnett. I've been against it for, over a decade when we started the conversation. A number of reasons, but the burden on nonprofits and religious organizations was also part of it. So like I say, I appreciate the conversation and some of the change of mind. Regarding religious institutions, What we're talking about here is a change that was made some years ago to social services, and the dumping of some of those social services onto the private sector, where the not-for-profits and religious institutions. And that is a great burden. And it's not just religious, it's also the other nonprofits. So in case you don't think you're hearing from any of them, I'm president of the Board of Senior Home Sharing. It's not a lot of money. I think if you look it up, it's about $230. That's groceries for our seniors. You aren't just losing $216,000 a year. It's not just evaporating. It's going into social services. It's not you lost this, you're investing in your community. You're investing in services for these people. Yeah, maybe somebody will have to wait an extra year or two to get a project done, but looking out that many years, you're going to have higher priority projects done earlier. So by the time you get to there, how long did it take to do sidewalks? Sign ordinance tonight was over 10 years. So, you know, it's time you're making an investment in social services. You're talking about flooding, okay. How about food or a place to stay for a mother who is homeless with 2 children, living in the car, getting into a safe place to stay for the night, and so that she can take her children to a Downers Grove school and get them an education so that they can get rid of this cycle of poverty. What about people the homeless, the other homeless? There's just a lot of social issues that would go unmet. And so this isn't a loss of $216,000 a year. It's a reinvestment, and it's an investment in the community, and it provides direct services to the people in the community, and not some multi-million-dollar project down the road somewhere. It's immediate, and the effects are immediate. Thank you.
Thank you. Good evening.
Hi, Marge Earl, 4720 Florence Avenue. I was not for the stormwater utility when it was first proposed. I thought it was a bad idea. But I was told that this was going to be good for the community, it was going to spread everything out evenly. And it went forward, and I went along with it, and you know, okay, fine. It's another fee everyone has to pay. Everyone pays for water, everyone pays for sewer. Why shouldn't everybody pay for the stormwater? It seemed, you know, it seemed fair at the time. I'm standing up here because I'm telling you that as long as it's fair, I think it should stay the way it is. If you're going to take anybody out of this utility, it starts to change all of the dynamics of it. It starts to change the bonding authority for the village, which we were told at the beginning. It starts to change how much everyone else is going to have to bear the burden of. Fine and dandy, if you're going to do that, put it back on my property taxes where at least some of the people, majority of them being families in this town, maybe it's not going to help the seniors because they're on a fixed rate, but their property taxes are pretty much frozen. It's going to help the people whose property taxes keep going up every year to be able to deduct that off of their federal income taxes. Because right now I can't deduct anything like this several $100s I have to pay every year off my federal income taxes. So I used to be able to when it was part of my tax bill. So I agree with Commissioner Olson, if you're gonna take anybody out, put the baby back in, because it doesn't make any sense. Either leave it the way it is, or put the baby back. Thank you.
Thank you. Good evening.
Good evening. I'm Andrew Peloso. I live on Stanley Avenue. Mr. Mayor, Commissioners, thank you for the opportunity to be able to speak on this issue. I wasn't going to speak on this issue tonight. I didn't think that I had enough information, enough facts to be able to even have an opinion as to how to even begin to talk about this. I knew that there was going to be a lot of folks that were going to have really impassioned views on one side or the other, and that is a good thing to do. It is a good thing to have the population of the village be involved and to have strong opinions one way or another. It motivates and advises a good political decision. I think there were some things tonight that I think should also advise a good political decision. For example, the impacts of the fee, changes to the fee on the bonding authority and the ability of the village to be able to carry out the important infrastructure projects that are necessary to make this an attractive place for residents and for businesses. I've heard the council on a number of occasions talk at length about the importance of making this community business friendly. How friendly was this community in April of 2013 when a lot of it went under, when people's basements, people's businesses were flooded by stormwater, by unusual rain events, which we would all like to believe are not going to happen again, but which may and which point towards significant issues in our infrastructure. And they point towards the reasons why we have a stormwater utility in the first place. And so if I'm going to sit there as a ratepayer and I'm going to sit there as a fee payer or as a taxpayer, and I'm going to listen to facts that are going to be debated or information that's going to be debated about the bonding authority for the village and the ability for some of these projects to go forward, I've got a lot of concerns about that. And I've got a lot of fears about that too. I sit on high ground. I'm lucky. I got to watch Rogers flood, watch the water come up within minutes in April of 2013. Come up so fast that the village was not even aware that the road was unsafe to travel on. You know, we talk about money, we talk about human services, social services. We talk about real issues that are associated with stormwater that are not just things about, people think, well, it's just we're protecting fish or we're taxing rain. People die in flooded conditions. People's businesses close because they suffer irreparable damages. People make decisions as to whether they want to stay in this community, whether they want to invest in this community, whether they want to come to this community. And it's based on a number of different factors. The sign ordinance, the attractiveness of the tax base to businesses, to taxpayers, the affordability of the community. Infrastructure plays a role in that too, and I'm sure you're all abundantly aware of that. Whether it's well-maintained streets, whether it's a good, strong police force, whether it's a building that can support government or not support government, and whether stormwater is addressed. And if you're thinking long-term, if we're thinking about the future of the village and the viability of the village and the importance of the village as a livable, economically viable community, these are all things that you all need to consider as you go forward on this issue. You're talking about a small amount of money. You're talking about bonding authority. You're really talking about the future of the village. And it's not a discussion that should be done in a night. It's not a discussion that should not involve the people who elected you, the people who are paying taxes. You all pay taxes as well. There's something to be considered for that. I don't want to close on sort of a dark sense of humor, but I was thinking about a quote, and it was, "Nero fiddled while Rome burned." What will the council's quote be when Downers floods? Think about that as you go forward on this debate. Thank you.
Thank you for your comments. We have to have one more quote tonight because it's always a trifecta. It's necessary. So there's the challenge. Yes, sir.
Good evening, everybody. I'm Clint Mattson. I live in Woodward Avenue. Appreciate the opportunity. I'm going to keep this short. I had a lot more probably, but we've been talking about this a while, and it's, 9:20. I just want to say a couple things. I think it is about how you interact with the nonprofits, how you interact with the community. You can't disregard that. You can't diminish that, what that makes the community. The value that we bring is the other one. As a faith-based community, I'm part of the St. Mary's Parish. But that aside, the value that's there is often overlooked. We talked about it tonight, but I think it's important to bring it up again. House the poor, host food pantries, medical assistance, employment programs, the list goes on. So in closing, we all pay our fair share, right? I've got two bills here. One's 3 years ago, one's a month ago. It's 133% higher. And that's not why I'm here. It's a matter of what we bring to the community. So the invocation of Joe Biden and value was brought up.
show me the value, show me show me your value, and I'll show you your, what was it? Show me your budget, and I'll show you your value. I could bring up the budget items from the faith-based communities and non-faith-based, but provide services, and I guarantee they'd be more than $218,000 a year. So, thank you very much, guys.
Thank you. Other questions or comments from the audience? Good evening.
Anthony Ching, 5507 Aubrey Terrace. I'll try to keep this short. I find myself a little bit torn. I've always believed that government should be involved in determining what was the social needs. I'm firmly for a leaner government, but I'm also for the privatization of such social services. So my heart kind of bleeds out for the faith-based community in this area. But the other side of the coin is I also look at bonding authorities and the ability to acquire assets. And I think I have to give a lot of credence to what Commissioner Olson was saying. And if we're considering really hacking up things to, or being a surgical lawyer or a financial engineer of some sort, let's look at what we're considering from a taxation base and consider shifting it back. So we can, kind of what Ms. Earl had mentioned, maybe we could take it as credit on our income tax returns as well. So let's give a wide analysis into this and not just a really lengthy evening of discussion. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. The final questions or comments from members of the audience? All right, we're going to take a roll call.
Mayor,
I think
could you clarify what we're voting on?
Just in case everyone's forgotten.
Well, I just want to be clear what staff is being directed to do by this roll call.
Fair point. As I understood it, manager will correct me if I'm not, is there's a motion and a second to direct staff to restructure the stormwater utility to exclude tax-exempt parcels. Included within that will also be a preparation of what it would look like if it was faith-based tax-exempt parcels. There will be opportunities to discuss this further because the manifestation of that restructuring has to appear in other documents that we would need to discuss publicly, receive input on, and then ultimately vote on. So that's what I understood.
That's correct.
Practical effect of this.
We will take the motion as restructuring the information with restructuring, change the FY15 budget, change the multi-year stormwater utility revenue and expense plan, and prepare an ordinance changing the structure. And we would do that exempting all property tax exempts. In addition to that, we will provide information for an alternative. But the motion itself would be taken as those three things reflecting all property tax exempts out.
Right, and as a practical matter, in order to do this right, we'd have to do it in more detail anyway.
Correct.
We wouldn't want to just, we're not like the federal government, we just pass a law and then go kick it off to some agency to figure out what it actually means. We'd want to do that work up front so that everybody understands exactly what's happening.
So more or less in this case, a yes vote allows this discussion to continue at our budget meeting on Saturday and then into the future.
That's the way I understand it, and with the advantage of looking at the actual implementation or manifestation of what the implications would be of the direction.
We can look at that.
Which then is also available for public discussion.
Right, and we can continue to engage the residents as you desire.
That's the way I understand it.
Thank you, Mayor, I appreciate that clarification.
Okay. There being no confusion, no shred of confusion left. Roll call, please.
Commissioner Barnett?
Aye.
Commissioner Durkin?
Aye.
Commissioner Jose?
Aye.
Commissioner Olson?
Aye.
Commissioner Rankin?
Aye.
Commissioner Neustadt?
Aye.
Mayor Tully?
Aye. Motion passed unanimously. I am going to suggest, with everyone's indulgence, that we take a very short break since it's about 9:30 and some may want to use the facilities. If that's okay, I'm going to wait for a red light to come on, or maybe not, but we'll take a 5-minute break. It's about, why don't we come back at 9:35, please? And we have two more new business items to take up. Thanks, Sean. There we go. Welcome back, everyone. We are still at the October 7th, 2014 meeting of Downers Grove Village Council. We took a brief intermission. We are still on item 13. We just completed items A and B under new business, and we are now moving to item C. and then we will also address item D. I have been asked by some members of the audience if my colleagues could please speak up. Apparently, there were some folks in the back that missed a good part of the conversation that took place because they couldn't hear us or couldn't hear some of us. I doubt that someone included me, and I won't name anybody else. So I'm just passing on that request. The next item is item 13, C as in Charlie, and again, this was something that was first raised by Commissioner Barnett, the Research and Development Team Proposal. Commissioner, do you want to introduce this one as well?
Thanks, Mayor. Going back to, again, September 9th meeting, this is one of the issues that I asked that we collectively talk about in the near future. This goes back, if you will, to a meeting we had in the committee room where the discussion, while it wandered a bit, had to do with, I think, Mayor, the way you put it was manufacturing capacity and staff, if you will. And that's probably an adequate way of describing it, whether it's adding capacity or R&D team. I'll make the proposal to start the conversation, but it would be to recommend that we increase general fund expenses by $200,000 and raising the revenues by $180,000, which is a property tax levy issue, to fund, for lack of a better term, a research and development team of staff. That's a term that is pretty undefined, and frankly, this council person making the motion would leave that very much up to Dave and his team to really define that, but the idea is to try and add some capacity.
Thank you. Well, I think I said, and others said, after you raised it a few weeks ago, and in some long-range planning meetings, I think the concept is exciting, it's creative, and if you think of like the Skunk Works or something like that, or famous places of innovation, it could be really cool, and I think something could be long-term very beneficial for the community, and I think that's important, is that we always remind ourselves to focus on the long-term and not on the short-term. Because sometimes the short term can be focused on at the expense of the long term. And so I'm in favor and excited about pursuing the concept. I'm only just reacting a little bit to the cost element of it, given some of the other things that we have in the air right now. I wouldn't want to, and I'm going to sound like everybody else, I don't want to increase the property tax. Let me just get all that out there right now. That's my concern, is how we fund it. If there was a way to fund it, or even figure out a way where we thought that, and I know this is not going to do it tonight, but I'm in favor of exploring the concept further. If there was a way that we could look at it as something that by investing X, we could reasonably expect Y, or at least have some expectations as to Y, then I think it's a much easier buy-in. And I think also it's something that people want to understand more, why they're paying another $200,000 in property tax, or 180 as the case may be. But I think conceptually it's exciting. It's something I'd like to continue to pursue.
Can I start the conversation, put a little more context to it? Are you, Martin, I apologize for interrupting, are you wanting to operate with a second for discussion? Or do you want to just have this workshop kind of format, or what are you going to do?
I think it depends, and we've been actually using new business in a way that's been very refreshing. Is we're having these kind of dinner table conversations about things, so I think it's good. It's just too bad they come at 9:30 at night, but we're doing it, which is good. I think in some cases, and I'll defer to what your preference is, Commissioner, but in some cases I think it's been helpful to kind of talk about them a little bit before we make a motion so that we know what the motion is.
Correct.
I don't know if this is one of those or not.
Sure.
I mean, for example, the tax, the text amendment, the sign words was pretty straightforward. We didn't need to have a conversation to decide what that was. But if you think conversation would be helpful before crafting the motion, that's fine. If you have a motion in mind, that's fine too.
I think if you'll let me continue, it maybe isn't even motion worthy, but it is appropriate, I think, timing to get us started talking about the concept prior certainly to Saturday, and that staff be aware if there seems to be any support at all for further pursuing it. So the idea, you mentioned Skunk Works, Mayor, and if that was targeted to me, well done. But the
I could have said Menlo Park too.
You could have said Menlo Park. The idea that there would be a cost-benefit equation is certainly one that we try in most instances to embrace really heavily, and there's a lot of evidence that we've done that over the years. because it's important that it not be sort of a never-ending hole in which you pour money. It also, on the flip side, though, is a little bit of a challenge to quantify this. If we go back and revisit that discussion a few weeks ago, what I think we have sort of a chicken and an egg circle on, and I don't know that this is the solution, so let me be clear that I don't know this is a solution. It's one solution because I do think it's a problem that needs addressing. We find ourselves with limited staff capacity. Just tonight, for instance, we heard about two things. We heard about a revisiting of the sign ordinance, and we heard about a dumpster enclosure. I don't have any idea if those are going to get traction or not. But each time we meet, and each time we meet with residents and the community, we are presented with opportunities. Not all of them certainly can make it to the list, whatever the list is. If you had 1,000 staff, you still would end up probably with a longer list than you would get done. But if you go back and look at FTE, full-time employee counts dating back to 2007, we're still about 10% less employees in 2014 than we had in 2007. If you look at the general fund expenses, less fire and police pension, I'm removing those because they're a little bit out of our control. We have a 2013 projected 2014 general fund expense that also is less than in 2007. So to think that we were 7 years down the road and we're dealing with less people and less general fund expenses, there's an awful lot of good, and there's a lot of evidence in that in and of itself that our staff is doing a lot of this kind of R&D work. You only get to that point by being innovative and looking for innovation and not being afraid of innovation. I am just concerned that as I talk with my colleagues and I talk with residents over the last couple of years, we are, as an organization, struggling for capacity. We could each name the list, and I won't burden everybody with that. We did that a few weeks ago. So this was an idea, and the context of it was important. We have a sort of an opportunity, if you will, from a levy standpoint, in that we are anticipating a slight reduction in the levy requirements of those police and fire pensions, just no fault of our own. It's due to the performance of those funds over the last year. But it could allow us to test this premise without actually increasing property tax levy. And so if it was structured in the theater of Bob's mind, it's an employee plus a couple of interns managed by Dave and whoever else he assigns. I don't know if that's what it looks like, but it needn't be long-term 3-4 person staff ads. It very much could be the kind of thing that you wouldn't start it on January 1 anyway, so you're not likely to burn the whole budgeted amount. It might give us a little bit of breathing room to try this and see what benefit comes of it, knowing that it's pretty tough to quantify that on the front end, while not having to increase the levy. If you were looking at a slight levy increase for whatever number, whatever reasons, then of course it's a much tougher pill to swallow. But there'd be a lot to be said if you thought you were going to go from 2007 to 2015 with a still lower levy, which is where we would land, even if you added this back. So, I'm sorry, not levy, but the levy would give us the opportunity to put it in the budget. So that's sort of the context. It probably isn't motion-worthy tonight, but that's where I'm going with it, and that's what I'm trying to accomplish.
I agree that it's probably not motion-worthy at this point. It probably needs a little additional work. I understand and appreciate that trying to do an ROI calculation at this point is
tough.
Not worth it, and it's difficult until you have some experience in the field. I think it's a good idea. I think it would be worth some investment to find out what the return might be. If there were more creative ways to perhaps fund it, maybe that in and of itself is part of the project. But I definitely would like to continue the conversation. But I think there's real benefit that could come out of it. I didn't mention Skunk Works accidentally. Commissioner?
Thanks, Mayor. I think Commissioner Barnett wrote up a little proposal here for us, and there's 3 phrases that I'd like to repeat out of that. Innovation, incubation, manpower flexibility, and intern-esque folks. I think those 3 things are actually things that we do right now in our organization. We do them pretty well. I think innovation comes from anywhere and everywhere in the organization. The organizational chart gets thrown out the window sometimes. If there's a great idea, it works its way through all the way up to the manager's office and then to us. Manpower flexibility, I've got two examples, and I'm sure there's more, I'm gonna add one more right now, but where we've hired outside consultants to keep down the ongoing personnel costs, the benefits, the pensionable costs, stormwater, utility implementation, sign ordinance compliance, and then even some other outside engineering review and things like that. We have consultants on staff, or we've hired consultants to come in and support us for those issues. Now, I think those are specific, very narrowly defined items that those consultants and staff would look at. What I'm hearing, the proposal from Commissioner Barnett is kind of the what if, or what's next, or what else can we do? And those are all great ideas, and I agree that it's something that we should continue to look at, but I think what we already do allows us to have that manpower flexibility. We always have the ability through the manager spending authority, through general change and ups and downs in budgeted items to find a couple dollars here or there if we needed to find someone to come in and work on a project, or hire a consultant for something that comes up. The 2015 budget, we're going to dive into that a lot more on Saturday, but it already does have some dollars and cents set aside for action items. The innovation incubation concept, I think, is entirely appropriate for any organization, whether it's a for-profit or not-for-profit organization. I think the return on investment that we've talked about tonight sometimes is easier to grasp in a for-profit situation because you can see the innovation turn into profit. Basically, that's how it goes. Here, at a service delivery area, we may see some service enhancement from an innovation, but a lot of it is kind of how we work with each other, and I think the innovation comes from municipal services. Innovation isn't always easy to quantify, I guess is what I'm getting at. So we've done a really good job of innovating here at the village. I would be interested to see what that one thing would be maybe next year, but I'm not ready to put in the budget next year extra dollars to hire somebody, but we don't, for something we don't know what it is yet. That's something that I'm not sure that I'm ready to make that move. And, as Mayor Tully said, it's not a bad thing to have the property tax levy go down. That shows that we have been extremely fiscally responsible with our funds. We are planning, and our long-range planning is working very, very well to be able to know that our levy can actually go down. And of course, we got a little help from the Police and Fire Pension Fund. There's no question there. But that's a good thing, and I think we should use that to our advantage going forward to save our taxpayers a few bucks. So it's a very, very good idea. I think we do a lot of the things that are in here already, and clearly with more staff we could get more things done. But how do we then prioritize that? Is that up to the council? Is it up to the management team? Are we getting too much into operations versus policy making? It is a circular kind of discussion, and I guess I'm halfway around the circle right now. Kind of interested in it, but not ready to make the expense, if that makes sense. Thank you.
Commissioner Rankin?
I have to say, I took pause a little bit at the number that was proposed to fund this. But I think it's more about the concept that we're talking about. Is this something that we could support hearing more about? I think we continually seem to be limited by staff capacity and the list. This would allow us to explore ideas and concepts in a quicker manner instead of waiting until the next council seated or until we make the next priority action item list. Maybe that number isn't the answer, but we know what the problem is, right? We know that we're trying to solve this problem of not being able to address things as quickly as we'd like to sometimes due to staff capacity. So maybe there's another way to get to that answer, and maybe staff can help us figure that out. Maybe it's an intern, maybe it's another management analyst. I would like to hear more about a solution to the problem that we have before us.
Yeah, and not to jump in, thank you for that, not to jump in, but I think Commissioner Barnett would agree that a lot of what this concept might be would be driven by, in fact, staff. To go to Commissioner Newstadt's point, we have succeeded because we have engaged terrific people. We've given them clear direction. the tools with which to accomplish their goals, and then to a large part, we've gotten out of the way and let them do their job. And so some of this, I think, is great conceptually, but what it ends up looking like, I think, should be, in some respects, driven by what staff thinks would actually achieve the goal that is being defined by the innovation in the first place. So just to pick up on your point, I think for us to try to define what that is, I think at some point we have to use the formula that's worked very well.
Hey, Mayor. Mary, can I
Sure, yes, please.
expound on that
Yes.
particular topic? You know, you're exactly right, and in a broad stroke message, if you will, I can only relate to this, you know, as though from a private standpoint and the idea of investment and the investment of R&D and stuff. I wouldn't even approach this idea if I didn't think the net result would be a leveraging of what our staff's already done. You wouldn't see me sitting down here saying, geez, I think we ought to put $180,000 into some amorphous concept, let Dave figure it out with his team, if I didn't think the team would probably really return on it. Can I quantify it? Not a chance. And one of the things about R&D departments or Skunk Works or whatever you want to frame it up as, is that there's as many failures as there are successes. That's usually the case. It's pretty tough to quantify it. And so, you know, it may not be ready for prime time in this moment, but I think, Mayor, you're exactly right, and Becky, you too, that exactly us finding it is not going to be the answer, at least not from where I see it. It's a resources provision kind of a thing more than it is an exact definition. Sorry, Greg?
No, that's right. I think when you boil this proposal down to its essence, it's we want more staff capacity, and how do we go about getting it? And I'm 100% in support of exploring that. I think that we should be in a position where we can say we've got 15 items on the list of priority action items. We want to add the following 5 things, and they are A, B, C, D, and E. Okay, staff, what's it going to take to get these additional 5 things done? If I want to get them done in 18 months instead of 2 years, what's that going to take? Because that's the only way we can truly make an informed value judgment on what we're going to prioritize, how much we're going to spend on these things, and as a result, how much we need to tax in order to get them done. So absolutely, let's continue to have this conversation. I think we should know what it takes in order to get more done, but I think the flip side of that coin is also what's the more we want to get done. So I think let's kind of maybe it has to wait until the next long-range planning meeting, maybe it doesn't. Maybe we can do it sooner. But I think the only way to really get the best informed judgment of how much more capacity do we need and what does that capacity look like is to know what it is we want to do. So what are the additional projects, I think, is the next question so that we can best discuss this proposal.
Simple question for Bob. What is it that we weren't able to do in a timely manner or not able to do at all that kind of created this thought? Not to put you on the spot, just...
Yeah, you know, I mean, I can only give you my immediate reaction, because I wasn't totally anticipating that, but as there have been a number of things from leaf programs to recycling downtown to second dumpster enclosures to things that come up such as, hey, you know what, we really probably ought to get into the sign ordinance. And what we have bumped up against is a staff capacity issue. Plus it's 7 people up here really trying to be operating in kind of good faith with each other, right?
Yeah.
It's unlikely that one of us that has a relatively small idea is going to press the others to displace one of those higher priority issues.
No, I understand.
Because we're trying to, you know, I mean, we all know that there's certainly higher priorities and lower priorities. And so when Martin characterized it at that one meeting as trying to build some manufacturing capacity flexibility, that's exactly what it is. It's, you know, the idea that we want to quantify it is an important one because we're dealing with taxpayer dollars and we need to be really mindful, but I don't know that it's totally quantifiable. It's a list that moves around.
Just to...
Mayor?
No, go ahead, please.
Well, I was just going to, my initial thoughts on this, I'm always open to new ideas, but I personally don't feel we are limited by our staff. I feel that our staff is flexible, they are efficient, and they come to us when they have issues, or if they say they can't do something, or if we propose something, we prioritize it, or we hire people, hire consultants, as Commissioner Neustadt mentioned. So, from my perspective, I think that fundamentally, this proposal, to me, I'm always willing to talk, once council has set priorities and staff has identified the resources that are available, staff said, and then the council comes back and says, well, we'd like to do more, or what would it take to do more, that's the time to discuss this type of proposal. To me, right now, this is what it feels like on, you know, right now, at this point in the game, is, you know, government for government's sake, and adding people and adding, you know, bureaucracy for government's sake. To me, the council sets priorities. The council has to be the one that sets our priorities, that establishes this list, that, you know, brings up new ideas. And then staff has, consistently, I think, been responsive to council and has been certainly vocal, in my opinion, and willing to share with us when there's a need, when there's maybe not capacity to me. So I think that those are the times when we can think about something like this. But, you know, from my perspective, to add people for the sake of adding people, or for the sake of, you know, thinking about new things, well, the new things need to be thought about by this body, this council. This council is the one that's elected to represent the residents. This council is the one that should be establishing those priorities. This council is the one that needs to direct staff. And then staff can come back to us and we can have dialogue about, you know, do we need more capacity? Do we need to hire a consultant? Do we need to hire a full-time staff person? I mean, what do we need to do? And I feel very confident that in our current structure, that Dave and his team will come back with those challenges. I'd also just like to note, as an aside, the proposed FY15 budget does include an additional management analyst, which I think sort of accomplishes a lot of the goal here of allowing the manager's office to be responsive to council and its direction and the priorities that we're setting here and these action items. So, from my perspective, we're sort of putting the cart before the horse in this case. I'd like to, you know, if there's consensus on an item, if there's consensus that we should revisit the sign ordinance, which I'd like to do for the record, and we punt that over to Dave and his team, and they assess it and can say, well, this is what we need to do. I'd like to have that conversation. So that's where I'm at on this. I don't, and the other point that I do want to make is to what Commissioner Neustadt emphasized and Mayor Tully emphasized, that at times we need to recognize that we have become more lean, more efficient, and at appropriate times, and I think FY15 may be one of those appropriate times, give some relief to the taxpayer. And I think that's something that I view as appropriate. I view it as something that you know, another reaffirmation about how we're working efficiently and how our staff is able to accomplish a great deal without increasing levy, and in this case, perhaps decreasing it slightly.
Yeah, go ahead.
You know, when you say, Commissioner Olson, I don't think anybody's proposing to add people just to add people. I think there's a purpose and a goal behind the proposal. I don't think it's just adding people to add people. I think that's a statement that's not accurate. And then also, I asked the manager about the additional management analyst position, and I think that position is a accounted for. I believe that those job tasks were needed before this was brought up, and that person wouldn't be able to really assist. Do I understand that correctly?
Right, the management analyst position is a new position proposed in the FY15 budget, specifically to get at things already on the list, specifically the implementation of the CRM, the customer relationship management, the gathering and analysis of information regarding union contracts, the implementation of the facilities plan, and the list goes on. And it's a staff reaction to making sure we have the resources in place to get to our current list.
And that's exactly my point, is that staff is reacting to the priorities that are being set by this council.
Well, and I agree with that, Commissioner, although I think just in fairness, perhaps manufacturing capacity wasn't a complete description, because it's not as though all of a sudden there's a big spike in building permit demands, and we're not able to meet the delivery schedule we would like. So there's a near and present need, and your theory of just-in-time delivery, if that situation arose, then staff would, as they always do, figure out a way to increase capacity in order to keep the return of building permits on a timely basis. I think it's more than that, and I don't want to put words in Commissioner Barnett's mouth, but when I hear research and development, it's not about necessarily we just need 2 more people on the assembly line in order to make more widgets. It's more than that. It's really freeing staff up to think more broadly about different ways, consistent with the mission of the organization as directed by the community and council, to do things in ways that perhaps they haven't done before. I mean, this is very much a private sector thing. In fact, my organization is doing something like this right now in conjunction with clients. And it's about the next generation of delivery of services. So it's more than just making more widgets because the demand is increased. That's part of it, but if I understood Commissioner Barnett correctly, it's more than just that.
It's quite a bit more than that, Mayor. You have said it better than I did, and I appreciate that. It's also about trying to prepare to take leaps and not necessarily small steps. The idea that there would be government for government's sake, I guess that in some context maybe sounds entertaining. This group, which is this council, the one prior to it, and the staff prior to it, have a near decade-long record of levies that went up, levies that went down, levies that stayed flat, staff counts that went up, staff counts that went down, staffs that stayed flat. There's no permanent horrible bureaucratic government growth of the village of Downers Grove. It just couldn't be farther from the truth. It's quite a bit more than just adding a couple people in hopes that maybe we'd find something for them to do.
From the staff perspective, just to chime in at some of the ideas of capacity, we really see 3 different types of capacity, and they're all being talked about sort of interchangeably tonight. The first is service delivery capacity, our ability to deliver day-to-day services. Do we have a shortage there? No, we do not. However, if you ask every single director of every single department, could they use more people for service delivery and enhancement and to do a better job because they are results driven? Yes. All of them would say yes, because all of them can maximize those resources. But from a day-to-day service delivery capacity, we're all as razor thin as we can be, but we don't have any particular challenges. If you gave us more resources in the service delivery day-to-day, we'd take advantage of them and maximize them. Second capacity, policy making and special or large projects. These are things on the list. This is a combination of staff capacity through analysis and specialization of particular things, combined with organizational and community capacity. How quickly can we as a team make policy? Staff framing it and analyzing it, the community discussing it, the council making a policy decision. Those 3 things all work together in the capacity to make great policy and to do special projects. On occasion, we have had some challenges there. When we have those challenges, staff recommends augmenting our team through consultants or part-time staff. Best examples, Commissioner Neustadt just went through. When we did the stormwater utility, we hired a consultant. When we enforced the sign ordinance, we hired a consultant. So we've had the ability to flex staff capacity, and yet we still struggle with organizational capacity and community capacity, and to be able to move quickly through that list. For example, we have several items on our current list that are queued up. The staff analysis is done. It's carving out the right time, the right place, the right way to make great policy in the scheme of the workload of our boards and commissions. The agendas, like tonight at 10:06, we're still going on these things. Those types of issues. The third area is innovation capacity. While the first two measures of capacity are easy to measure, easy to implement, and have immediate results, innovation capacity is a long-term approach. It's R&D to the private sector. It's difficult to measure because you're testing new ideas, new concepts, new theories. Some of them will reap benefits in the short term, most of them reap benefits in the long term, and some will flat out fail, as Commissioner Barnett talked about. If a council wants to give a community capacity to innovate, you will hear your staff say yes. Absolutely, that's a great luxury to have, and I think we've earned it as a team because we as a team have innovated at the council level, at the community level, board, commission, and staff. So if that's the direction, of course staff would support that. But what I want to make sure we're clear is the three different types of capacity. Service delivery, which is manufacturing, special project or policy making, that's the list. And I think the issue here is innovative capacity, which is more an R&D function, which is not readily available for analysis or direct result measurement, but is in it for the long haul to make for better and more efficient government. I hope that helps frame up how staff is viewing the three types of capacity.
Well done. Much appreciated. Well, I guess what I'm hearing, just to try to wrap it up, as we do another item to talk about, is that I think everybody's supportive of the concept. There are some issues about, with the added addition, the addition of the clarification. I think there legitimately are concerns about how to pay for it, but we're not deciding that tonight. Anyway, what I'm hearing is continue the conversation, maybe get some more definition as what it might be.
I appreciate the conversation. This is a continuation of the meeting from a few weeks ago. It's an evolution of an idea that seems to have some interest. I'm glad we're still talking about it.
Right. Well, I guess the conversation will continue is the outcome of this conversation.
Are we ready?
Yes.
Okay.
Questions, comments, please.
Once again, Bill Waldeck, 1409 Willard Place. We just spent over an hour discussing the hurt and pain of losing $200,000 for something concrete. Do you do social services? Do you do stormwater? And we had this big conversation, and now it's like, oh, why don't we go out and spend $200,000 or thereabouts for an idea incubator? We aren't using the capacity we have for ideas. For example, we had TCD2, TCD3. In TCD3, one of the recommendations was to develop communications with the neighborhoods to come up so that they would be able to provide input, come up with ideas, and work with the village. Well, that was pushed aside. TCD3 was an attempt to innovate, to find out what the community wanted and to go about trying to get it. We've had budget discussions about travel, going to classes, enhancing our employees so that they can come up with ideas. And some of those who want to spend this kind of money on innovation don't support going to conferences or even leaving the state. One of the big things, one of the big ideas, stormwater. I regret that one, but that's how stormwater came to be. At a conference, it was innovation. It was an idea that was presented at a conference. What was the cost of going to that conference versus hiring employees at $200,000 or whatever the cost might be? So, it was I disagree with the idea, but it was a really big idea. We've had big ideas. We have a council that's supposed to have ideas. we have employees that we can train, and that they, hopefully we're using an employee suggestion box like we used to, and I wish it was filled all the time. So as far as ideas go, there's plenty of opportunities for ideas that we just aren't using, and yet we're willing to go out, or talking about willing to go out and spend real money that could be actually used for something else. I think we've gotten consultants as needed when there was a need to approach new ideas and to try things out. And I think that's really still the way to go. I dislike consultants, always dislike consultants, but sometimes they're a necessary evil. And to go out and hire employees to be idea generators, I think at this point is absolutely silly. Sorry. Thanks.
Thank you for sharing your ideas.
And it was free.
There's an opportunity cost to everything, Mr. Waldeck. Free is how you define it. But thank you for being here as always. Other questions or comments on this item? All right, then we will go to the next one, which is 13, D as in David. This item pertains to the Community Grants Program and the Community Grants Committee. Since this was my idea, it was also free, by the way, I will go ahead and just introduce it. I wanted to put this on the agenda for discussion by council in advance of our budget meeting because without going into the history that most people know, the Community Grants Program used to exist as a function within the village that was funded by a percentage of the hotel motel tax. A million years ago, there was a report that was done by Cummings and McNulty. I think I'm one of 2 people in the village that remember that term. And the idea was that by taking a portion of the hotel motel sales tax and using it to seed or facilitate cultural arts programs in the community, that this would help make Downers Grove a more attractive place for people to visit. The idea being you take some money from your hotel motel and you pump it back into creating things for people to come and do. Choral Society, concerts, the Midwest Ballet, the New World Repertory Theater when it was here, and a host of other things, which I won't go into. There's a list in the green sheet. Everybody has it in front of them. In 2004, there was an attempt to refocus what the funds were used for because I think there was a time when the funds, some questioned, I was one of them, as to whether the funds were being used consistent with the original intended purpose of the Community Grants Program, and so the criteria were revamped, and they're here in the green sheet, what they were, but again, there was a strong component about celebrating and contributing to cultural arts in the community, contributing to a positive image, and if possible, attracting visitors to Downers Grove to spend money in hotels, restaurants, and so on and so forth to help grow the base. Was it a giant performing arts center? No, although that was a topic of discussion for a number of years as well, and that didn't come to fruition. It got better and it worked, and there were a number of different cultural, performing arts and other cultural events and organizations in town that a large part of the funding came from the program. And there was always some question about whether they would continue to survive without it. Fast forward, there was a very harsh recession. There were a lot of tough calls that were made. One of the tough calls that were made by the council at that time was to take that 8% and use it for other things that were deemed to be of a higher priority, and the Community Grants Program was defunded. So there being no funds to distribute to the applicants to the grant program, the Community Grants Committee or Commission, which used to meet almost exclusively for the purpose of assessing, evaluating, and then awarding these community grants from the defined pool of funds, which I think we're looking at, if it was 8% of the current hotel motel, it was what, $68,000, something like that. In years past, it was less than that, but it was a defined pot of money. But for those organizations, it did a lot of good, kind of like the discussion earlier tonight about it may not be a lot of money for a faith-based organization, but it can go a long way. A lot of these organizations was the same kind of thing, although their mission was different. The recession hit, the funding was eliminated, so the Community Grants Commission had nothing to do, because there were no funds and no grants to support, and that was a number of years ago. The question has come up, a couple residents have raised it every budget season, what about community grants, what about community grants? So I just simply wanted to bring it up so we could achieve some decision as to what, if anything, is going to become of it. I don't think we should do nothing and just let it hang out there. I mean, there are people who get appointed to it and don't meet because they have nothing to do. And we have a commission that's listed on our website that people can apply for that doesn't do anything. So I think as a council, we should decide whether or not it's going to be funded either in this budget season or in some future budget season, such that it should continue to exist. Or if we've now got the experience of not having it, and the cultural organizations that are left, some of them have moved on. I'm not suggesting they moved on because not of this, but they're just not here. Like New World Repertory Theater, for example. The question is, if the decision is not to fund it again, then we should just say that, eliminate it from the municipal ordinance, and let people know that there's no longer Community Grants Commission. I think that it would be helpful to have that discussion as part of the budget process. I don't want to decide that necessarily tonight, but my request would be, I'm not sure what my request is, it may not be motion worthy, I'm going to use your term, Commissioner. My request is really to have it as to continue as part of our budget conversation. We now have the information, the history of the dollars in front of us, hear what the community thinks, and give an opportunity for members of interested stakeholders to attend budget meetings and speak their piece, and we'll get some input. But I think if we get to this end of this budget season and there's been no interest in continuing it either now or in the future, then we got to eliminate it once and for all and just close the book. So that's really why I brought it up. So I don't know if there's a motion involved, actually. My only request would be, if everyone agrees, that we just continue as part of the budget discussion. Commissioner?
I don't think we've actually had serving people on the board for a long time, right? Since 2010, there might have been some overlap in their terms, but nobody's been reappointed or anything for...
Right. It's been inactive since 2010. Technically, you serve until you resign or you're removed, basically. So I would describe it as a dormant.
All right. Having been the last chairman of the board, board and commission, I think one of the interesting things of the criteria was demonstrate the potential to become financially self-sustaining. As I look through the list, I think many of the organizations that are still on this list are certainly still self-sustaining themselves through other donations and financial opportunities. Having gone through the last incarnation of this, it was very interesting to see some of the requests, and while they were all very, very valuable and very good community events and very good not-for-profit organizations, I think it became routine for some of the community grant participants that they expected these dollars. We now have a period of time of history where they haven't been getting the donation or the grant from the Village of Downers Grove, which shows that this list is still sustaining itself. In some cases, they've even propelled themselves into bigger and better events. Use the Rotary as an example. We used to give them anywhere between $1,000 and $2,000 in this program, but now they are self-sustaining and running their own event, probably surpassing that grant funding by tens of thousands of dollars in revenue. I think a couple of budgets ago, or maybe each budget ago for the last couple of years, I've said, it's time to just get this off the books and take it off the website, take it off the list of boards and commissions. We've been talking a lot about money and what's right and social services and who gets what and how and who are the better, or who are the people that should get support from the village government. I think in this case, the grant dollars that would be awarded here are better used somewhere else. I think the reduction by 8% of the hotel motel sales tax revenue would affect the EDC. It's not a huge number, but I think if I'm remembering right from our meeting on Friday, I'm looking at Manager Fieldman, that the EDC gets their funding from that hotel tax revenue, and they would get their funding after the 8% was taken out of that revenue. Am I saying that right,
It would be
Dave, or-
before the cut. It would be, the EDC by formula gets 50% of the hotel motel tax every year per agreement. And then the 8%, if we keep the same funding formula, would be 8% of the total, which would just reduce the amount available for general operations in the general fund.
Okay. So, I think that this, it served its course back when we had it. I think, I haven't heard from any of these organizations asking. We've heard from Dr. Goodman a few times in the past. I just don't think it's time to reinstate it. I think it's time to put it to sleep forever and take it out of our rotation.
Commissioner Olson?
I'm going to agree with Commissioner Newstead on this one. I think that there's no doubt about the value of these organizations on the community. I think that my personal view is that the role of government is this. This is one of those things that's nice to have, and in great economic times, maybe nice to have. But from my perspective and where we are as a village and the lean principles and that we've adopted, I think it's time to move past. This is the idea that time has come and gone. So I agree that we should take it off the books.
Does anyone want to keep it? Does anyone want to fund it either now or in the future at any point in time? We can circuit the conversation. Because really, I wanted to just get closure on this issue once and for all.
Real quick, Mayor, I'd just like to point out that even if we do take it off the books, and it seems that's where we're going, and I support that, folks can always come to us with ideas. There's nothing to say that an organization couldn't come to the village and say, hey, we think this is beneficial to the community, please fund a portion of this. Whatever the idea is, I don't want to necessarily put any bounds on it, but we always have that opportunity, whether it's through something on the agenda or new business, whether the Community Grants Commission exists or not.
That's true. There's an advantage to having a set body and procedures and criteria, but you're absolutely right.
Agreed.
And the only other thing I forgot to mention, not that this is going to change anything, clearly we're taking it off the books. There was somewhat of an incubator innovation aspect to some of this. Some of the organizations may not have gotten to where they are today had they not had some assistance early on. And again, that's a difference of viewpoint as to whether you think that's a thing we ought to be doing as government or not. I just wanted to bring this to a conclusion. It sounds, unless someone, feel free, I don't want to cut short the conversation, but unless anyone thinks they want to refund it now or sometime in the future.
I would just say, being on the Grove Foundation board, a lot of these people are people that we give grants to right now. So the whole concept of if this goes away, they will hopefully find funding in other ways. That's happened. So they're not going without.
That's one of the reasons we wanted the information, so we could see who the list was, to Jeff's point and to your point. If the organizations have found other ways to survive, the private sector solutions have stepped in, or other not-for-profits have stepped in to fill the void. We've heard a lot about voids being stepped in and filled tonight. Then so be it. I don't know if we need a motion on that, but can we just, it sounds like it's pretty much
We'll take that as direction.
Collective direction to take what steps are necessary to essentially eliminate community grants because there's no interest in funding it.
That's what we heard, and we'll act accordingly.
All right, well, that was the most decisive and quick of the items. All right, well, those are the items that we had on the agenda. Do the council members have any other new items of business that they want to get on the agenda for future meetings? Commissioner Olson?
Yeah, I wanted to bring this up, and I want to bring it up in a timely manner, so I apologize that, I know it is late, but I think it's something I'd like to, get a decision on more quickly and today rather than in the future. Just to preface, since we had our meeting on village facilities last month, I've personally received a lot of feedback from residents, and from a more diverse set of residents than any issue since I've been on the council. And, I've heard a variety of opinions on the issue. But one thing that's been nearly unanimous in the opinions that I've heard is that, residents desire an additional forum and additional opportunities for public comment and public input. And I think many folks, and the vast majority that I've spoken to, have asked for the opportunity to provide that input through a referendum. And I'd like to propose tonight a referendum, an advisory referendum on that issue. I think that residents having an ability to share their views on this project at the ballot box, in addition to the multiple ways we've engaged them already, will allow us to engage a greater, more diverse, broader set of this community. And I think that with such a decision that is very, very important decision for our community, for this council, and it's going to require quite a bit, commitment of significant amount of village resources. I think we do have a responsibility as a council to engage even more of our residents. So given the public feedback that I've received so far over the past month or so, I'd like to make a motion tonight to ask staff to prepare a question for council to consider that would be in accordance with, the law, the election law, which would ask the public an advisory public question regarding their support or opposition for the new facilities complex, and ask that be placed on the ballot for the April 2015 election, which is really the next election we can have something like this on the ballot. So I'd make that motion and like to, if there's a second, we'd love to hear discussion. If there's not a second, then, we'll have a council. So just like to make that motion.
I understand what you're asking, but I think that if not our procedure, certainly our practice has been not to take those things up under new business because they're not on the agenda, but what we've been doing is to, now you've identified the issue and it can be on new business for next week.
Yeah, I would agree.
Because I think it needs to...
You pigeonholed yourself.
Yeah, I think, hold on a second. Because I think it's, as broadly stated, it would be impossible for me to vote on it.
Okay,
I think
that's fine.
Number one, I think what we've been, for example, just with the 4 items we did, they were brought up before everybody had an opportunity to look at what it is. I mean, I think conceptually we all understand what you're saying, but
Right.
even just the question of, are you in support of facilities? Well, we already know there's 4 options out there, so what does that mean?
Right.
Just on its face. So I think what would be the proper practice is you've now put it out there, so it can be on new business next week.
Okay.
And I think it would probably behoove everybody to have some language.
Is it incumbent on Commissioner Olson to come up with the language, or he's requested staff to come up with?
Well, I don't even know if staff could come up with language based on what I said. I'll say it's incumbent upon you, because I'm going to come up with one with respect to what I suggested earlier tonight regarding we talked about a big value decision of the community regarding, right, the stormwater utility and faith-based organization. I've got easy language for that.
I'm happy to come up with
So I will have language for that for us to consider next week.
I have my own ideas on
We have
referendum
two new
question.
pieces of new business, one from...
Yes.
So I'm happy to bring that up.
I think yours is just to be candidly a lot more complicated to describe in a question, particularly given that it's a fluid, we pretty much know what the other issue is.
Well, certainly, but I think that, as we've discussed, and I think staff has fairly clear direction about what generally is being considered. So from my perspective, I think it is a fairly clear question, and I'm happy to draft that up.
Well,
Which complex are you talking
to
about?
me,
Your question, David, was the facilities complex. Are you talking about the complex here or the complex there? That's just one question within the question that you already
right.
talked about.
Well,
So that's
and
why
to me, it's a much broader question. I'm happy to provide language.
Right.
If there's interest, if there's no interest from any member of this council for an advisory referendum on that topic, then I'm, from my perspective, then,
But I think-
not waste
I
time.
think-
Here's what I would suggest, and I don't want to cut you off, Commissioner, here's what I would suggest. You've heard some concerns from some of your colleagues about even the wording, there may be concerns about the concept. You've brought it up, so it's now been identified, it's available to be put on new business agenda next week. You don't have to put it on the agenda tomorrow. I think you can give some thought to language. I do think it's incumbent upon you to come up with some language. I think it's probably also incumbent upon you to have some one-on-one conversations with your colleagues to find whether it's something you want to do or not. Certainly with respect to what I have in mind, that's what I'm going to do. I think my language is a lot easier because it's been something that's been talked about for 2 years, and we almost probably wrote it tonight. People may not support it, but at least they'll know what it is they're either supporting or not supporting.
Okay.
I think there's a
Well,
more,
I'm happy,
candidly, fairly, there's a much bigger challenge into what is it in your.
Well, I'm happy
in
to
your
provide,
description.
I'm happy to provide language, and, I'll give that to.
Sure.
Happy to provide that to you or to Dave, whatever's appropriate, so it can be placed on the agenda for next week under new business.
I think that's.
Happy to do that.
How we've been doing things. I'm getting some tepid agreement.
Mayor, could I add
Yes,
to that
by all
real
means.
quick? In the event this does move forward on new business for next week, I'd also like at least a short discussion from staff about how that, the placing of an advisory referendum would impact our ability to talk to the community, engage the community in different ways, in addition to the referendum itself. There's been some talk before about
Yes,
if we do
sure.
this, we can't necessarily do certain things. I'd like to know what those certain things are so that we know what we're getting into.
And we'll have the impact
Good
of
point.
waiting till April to get information on a plan that starts implementation in November. So we'll get you some information on the timing of asking the question as well.
And thus one of the reasons I wanted to bring this up tonight versus waiting until next meeting. Because I think that, given that it appears that, there's some willingness to have the question come back next week, I'm happy to work with staff on it and provide, my suggestion on language and, discuss this next week at next week's council meeting. So,
Yeah, and I will just tell you, and you and I have actually talked about it, I just think it's premature. I understand you have a timing issue with the election, that it is what it is, but I think it's premature, and to the extent that almost renders it impossible to craft the question. You may prove me wrong.
But Mayor, I mean,
This is
from my perspective, if we go forward with a plan and we purchase land and we make improvements to land, and then is that after we've done that, is that the appropriate time to ask a question and say, oh, well, we've sunk all this money, all this taxpayer money or TIF money, whatever money it is, it's all taxpayer money at the end of the day, but we've sunk all this taxpayer money in. Now it's time to go to the people and ask a question because it's real clear what the question is now. So to me, if there's going to be any type of question, it has to be now. It has to be at the outset, at the outset of the project. Because you can't ask a question when, well, I guess you could ask a question once the outcome's already decided, but from my perspective, if we already sunk $10 million into it, that would seem to be, kind of, I don't like the idea of sinking a lot of money into a plan that then we go and ask about what people think about it. I think that just doesn't make sense. So this is why I think this is if there's going to be any time to have a question, it has to be now. It has to be as soon as possible.
Do we want to do like Ed Knot night? Because it seems like Commissioner Olson has suggested that if there isn't interest in this at all, then it's not worth the work. I think from my perspective, we have been asking our residents for over a year now about this plan. We've had options galore. We've had dining room table meetings here. We've had meetings everywhere. And, we talked about this at our last our facilities planning meeting. You said yourself tonight that this council is elected to prioritize and make decisions. We have made a decision. I feel like governing by referendum, and this is no secret, I said this a couple weeks ago, governing by referendum isn't what we've been elected to do. It is a big decision, but we make big decisions all the time about millions of dollars in projects and everything else. We talked about a $2 million project tonight. We're replacing, that touches every resident, literally touches every resident with water service. It's not 10 million, it's not 52 million, but it's $2 million. We've got a couple of minor questions. Governing by referendum is not my choice. I'll tell you that right now. You don't have to give me a call tomorrow, or, I already told you that earlier today, too.
We talked about.
So if there isn't desire from the council to have Commissioner Olson work on it and then have the process go through with the staff, I would suggest that we can stop it tonight with a simple head nod, which is something that we've also done in the past before.
Well, fair.
If the process is wanted to be
fair.
gone through, so we can have a motion and have a second, have more discussion, that's great too. We'll all participate. But let's make sure we're all trying to get in the right direction of the work plan.
Fair point. I don't disagree with you, though, but procedurally, I think if Commissioner Olson wants to
Yeah,
raise somebody new business,
Under one of the council rules, if he asks for something to be placed on, if anyone asks for
Yes,
an item
sure.
to be placed on new business by Wednesday at noon of the
Yes.
preceding week, then it goes on.
yes, right. So I don't think we can, in any fashion, tell him he can't do it.
No, I'm not saying.
We can all express to him, as you just did, and I think I did, what he's probably going to hear from us, and then he can make his own decision between now and Wednesday. But I just want to clarify.
Well, I'm happy to put something together.
But I would encourage you to talk to everybody, Commissioner.
Sure. Happy to
You
do
and I
that.
spoke earlier today. Sounds like you spoke to Commissioner Neustadt.
Right.
You probably know where we're at, but obviously, our policy is if you want to put something on the agenda for new business, That's your prerogative. It's everyone's prerogative.
That would be tomorrow at noon, and then next Wednesday at noon for the next meeting.
Okay.
Sure. I'll get something to staff by tomorrow at noon.
Given the excuse me, timing challenges that Commissioner Olson talked about in terms of getting a question out to people in a timely manner, and the fact that, as Manager Fieldman has talked about, the facilities plan would start moving forward in November, I think the window that Commissioner Olson is seeking may have already been missed.
But I completely disagree on that, but.
Well, sounds like you're going to give me your opinion too.
Well, I'm just, and this was something that had not occurred to me previously, and that it's too late to put a referendum on the November ballot, is my understanding. I think those things are already being printed, or perhaps are already done being printed. So if we're moving forward in November, December, January, February, March, and money's being spent all along the way, the question, to a certain extent, is already old. We're already down the road long before we get to April, I don't know exactly the date of the election, but whatever the day of the election is.
Geez, you got that down, huh?
Well, my point on this one is,
civic duty.
From my perspective, the mayor has a point in saying the question is difficult to craft when there's no specific, you can't say, oh, well, do you approve or disapprove of X? And it's very clear what X is, and in the mayor's question, it's fairly clear what X is. This is a bit larger of a project, so it is a little bit larger, harder to define. So for a referendum to work, I think you have to have at least some definition. I think we've gotten to the point where there's enough definition in the direction that this council has provided that we have that opportunity. Unfortunately, election processes and the law requires us to take time and such. So we may have to take time. And I personally am willing to take some, I think that taking additional time for this feedback would be valuable. So that's why I've raised it. I agree that there are some costs to doing that. Certainly is some opportunity costs if you wait until after hearing this piece of public input. But I think there's trade-offs between do we want to engage people of this community even more fully, much more fully than we already have, in my opinion, or are we comfortable where we are now without engaging the people in that format? So that's why I've proposed this, and I'll get something to staff so that they can place it on the agenda and we can formally address it next week.
Well, you have that prerogative between now and noon tomorrow. I just continue to think that this actually we'll be interested to see what the result of Commissioner Jose's question is about the parameters on education, because I have some real concerns about the ability to cause there to be more public involvement and engagement through this path than what is currently planned. I think it may actually have the opposite result of what you're intending. And given the stage in which it is, it's very hard to even craft what the question is in a way that isn't designed to determine the outcome. Whereas, just to draw a distinction, the one I'm talking about, I think it's been talked about for 2 years, and it's very simple. It's as a value proposition, does the community want to exclude, let's just say, tax-exempt parcels from the stormwater setting, period. And people are going to know what that is. It's been out there for 2 years. I don't think there's any education involved, other than maybe what the dollar amounts are, but it's pretty simple. It's a value proposition. We heard some of it here today already, and it's just playing it out on a broader stage.
Unfortunately or
I
unfortunately.
think there's a lot of education that's required for this one, and I think that this path is not the best way to engage the community at the level and the way that we not only plan to do, but we typically do for projects of this scope and scale.
And there are a lot of people in this community that do not feel educated about this topic, that do not feel comfortable with the direction that this council is moving in, and wish to get their opinion heard. I mean, those people.
No, nobody's
approached
disagreeing.
me.
Nobody's disagreeing with that,
I've
Commissioner.
had dozens of people that I've never met before say, "Oh, I read the paper." or you mention it, well, what's your thought? You ask somebody on the train, oh, what's your thoughts? I have no idea what you're talking about. Well, go to the village website, look at it, and then say, oh, well, thank you for doing that, but none of my neighbors know either. So, you know, in my opinion, I think there are small ways, and this is one of those ways. So, anyway, I don't wish to drag this meeting out any longer, but thank you. Thank you. Thanks to everyone for the discussion. I appreciate that.
Sure. Commissioner Rankin, you haven't got a chance yet.
You know,
Ladies
I know your goal, you're saying to engage more of the residents, and I just kind of wanted to tap onto what the mayor was saying. When I was a staff person at a park district, and the park district wanted to build a pool, they would have to go to referendum. And what would happen would be, is that the staff would develop a little fact sheet. Staff was not permitted to promote or discuss even, really. We were discouraged discussing. We could answer questions based on the fact sheet. But our residents are used to the engagement efforts that we do all the time as a village. This would be completely dialed back. And how it worked was that there were resident committees that would try to promote this concept. If your goal is to provide more information, I don't know if a referendum is going to do that. I think it's going to provide less information.
My goal is to engage a broader segment of the community in the decision-making process.
So I just wanted to kind of share a perspective of being in the middle of it.
Right.
And it doesn't necessarily improve the information and the exposure to the situation.
I appreciate that.
Commissioner?
Thanks, Mayor. I just wanted to kind of remind us all, I've been critical or disappointed, I don't know what the right choice of words is, with some of our meeting formats. And I think tonight, although it was a little new for us and had some moments perhaps of discomfort, I thought it was pretty good. I mean, Mayor, you alluded to that a little earlier, that there was, some discussion above and beyond what there's been. And so to that end, it's getting late, so I'm getting a little nutty, but I'm thinking Maurice Slime and the Son and the Blues Brothers. I hate this idea, but at the same time, I think that trying to settle it tonight at 10:30 after it's first brought up is just not good process. I think that any one of us should be encouraged to bring it. Maybe it totally flops, maybe it's a home run, I don't know. But if we work similarly to the way we worked in terms of first presentation and then discussion about the council member brought items tonight, I thought that was better discussion. So I'd encourage that process to continue irrespective of the subject matter, so.
I have no problem with that. It allows everybody to, I agree with you.
Well,
And tape, buddy?
and in that light, in that spirit, I raised the topic tonight. That we had some initial discussion, and I will bring it next week back in a written format, so it can be placed on the agenda, and we'll have further discussion at that time.
So we got 2 for next week.
13 hours to get them ready.
Got mine right here. Mine's easy.
I guess my only question is, this is the magnitude of this project, as large as it is, the gray areas of residents not really in tune with what we're trying to do or looking at doing or accomplishing. What is the real hurry to get this done for Commissioner Olson? Because his gray areas of concern about residents not being in tune and about it, that is a true statement, because I'm getting it as well. And I'm just afraid that with the way it's being, I guess my question is, what is so time-consuming or time-sensitive that something has to be voted on in November?
It's the construction season for next year. It's the implication of next year's budget. And yeah, people are always going to have gray areas with village issues.
But this is a huge, huge
So
project.
was the stormwater utility, so was the 2007 bonding for stormwater, so was last year's budget item, whatever it was, so was buying a fire truck.
The perception out there is that this new facility, whatever the new facility is and whatever it's going to look like and however big it's going to be, it's an express train heading to the city of Chicago. And once it's done in November, no matter what the new council looks like, we'll not be able to make change to this.
But it's-
Because it goes back to what what David brought up, and that is that the expenditures have already been done, and nobody's gonna turn around and say, nope, we can't make change to that, because we've already wasting 10 million or 20 million, or whatever the number is.
That's not accurate. I think what it's incumbent on us is to be able to know the facts and explain them to anybody who inquires about what's happened in the past and what's proposed to happen in the future. We all get questions about stuff all the time.
Correct.
And yeah,
And I agree, we
there's
shouldn't be
proposed-
judging or voting based on referendums, and I agree with that statement. But
You know, I would encourage people to read about a 5-page memo which outlines the facilities plan that the council has expressed a preference for that option. It lays out a budget, it lays out a timeline, and the only reason I mentioned November is the first key action and implementation of this option, option 4, could come as soon as November in terms of approving a redevelopment agreement for the parcel at Ogden and Lacey. So everybody watching, anybody who wants to be engaged, it's a nice little 5-page memo that Mike worked up. It's a pretty easy read, and it's in the budget docs.
Thank you. Anything else you need from us?
No, sir.
You don't want anything more from us, do you?
That's plenty.
All right, motion to adjourn, please?
So moved.
Second.
Roll call, please.